Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. If you ever find a traffic light in the forest, don't move if it turns red. Just before my 11th birthday, my grandfather had invited me along for a 2-day hunting trip in the deep woods up north, close to where he'd grown up as a child. He'd been going there his whole life and said it was good ground for deer and that the air always carried the scent of old pines and wet moss. That morning couldn't have been better. The sky was pale blue and the air crisp enough to sting a bit when you breathe deep. We walked slowly down the trail, taking turns with binoculars to look at birds. He'd point out their names like he was listing old friends. Around noon, we found some late-season lingonberries and filled a small tin cup before moving on. A few hours later, we met another hiker coming down the trail. My grandfather greeted him by name. He was an older man with a red jacket and a face that looked weathered but kind. They started talking about local fishing spots and timber prices, things I had no interest in at the time. The sun was already approaching the horizon, casting orange light through the branches. I remember thinking it'd be nice to find a place to camp before dark. So, being young and impatient, I told him I'd go ahead a little to look for a spot. My grandfather just nodded and said not to go too far. The forest was quiet, apart from the wind and the occasional distant bird call. I spotted a small clearing just off the trail and pushed my way through a wall of pine branches. That's when I saw it, a tall, thin shape standing among the trees. At first, I thought it was a dead spruce, its bark stripped away and rust-colored. But as I walked closer, I realized it was made of metal. The rusted pole was crowned by a traffic light. Its lenses were cracked, and the signal housing was coated in a thin layer of moss. Yet there was a light inside, a faint green glow, flickering every few seconds like a weak heartbeat. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. There were no roads anywhere near this part of the forest, no wires, no sign of anything man-made except the traffic light itself. I remember thinking my grandfather would get a kick out of it. I jogged back to where he was still talking with the other man and told him I'd found something cool a bit further up the trail. He humored me, as he always did, and they both followed me back to the clearing. When we reached the spot, the traffic light was still there. I pointed at it, excited. "Do you think there used to be a road here?" I asked, maybe an old neighborhood or something. He didn't answer. I looked back at him. Color had drained from his face, and his eyes were locked on the light. The other man looked confused and was about to ask my grandfather something. But before he could speak, the green light had faded and was replaced by a yellow. That was when my grandfather moved. He grabbed me and pulled me tight against his chest. "Don't move," he said, his voice trembling. Then he called out to the other man, "Stand still. Don't move a muscle." The forest went silent. No birds, no wind. I could feel my grandfather's heartbeat quickening. "What's going on?" the man asked, his voice edged with a tone of confusion. I heard him take a step, maybe two. Then came the scream. It started sharp and turned into something animal, long, broken, echoing through the trees until it suddenly cut off. I felt my grandfather flinch slightly, but he didn't loosen his grip. We stood there for what felt like forever, frozen in place. The air smelled of metal, and a low humming seemed to come from all directions at once. My hair lifted slightly as if an electric charge was building overhead. Somewhere far off, a bird called, breaking the silence. My grandfather suddenly let go of me. He stumbled slightly and struggled to catch his balance before sinking onto a small rock. His legs shook from standing still for so long. I looked up at the traffic light. It had changed back to green. As we walked back to the trail, My grandfather had his arm wrapped around me and told me to keep my eyes closed. I wasn't supposed to look, but I did. A quick glance as we passed the remains of what had once been a person. A pile of clothes lay on the ground, charred, with thin wisps of smoke rising from them. The surrounding grass was stained dark red. Our trip was obviously cut short, and we made our way back to the car in the dark. Since then, I've asked my grandfather multiple times over the years about what he saw after the light changed to red, but he has refused to speak of it. As far as I know, the man we met on the trail that day is still listed as missing by the police. I think my grandfather knows more than he lets on about what we found. I've thought about going back there for years to see if it's still there, but I haven't dared. Not yet. Story 2. My family has a curse. It's finally catching up to me. Growing up, my family was never like other families I had known. I remember being 7, maybe 6.5, and noticing little things that made my father unlike other dads in our small cul-de-sac. My father's skin was sallow and white to the bone, regardless of any sun put onto his skin, a trait passed on to me. Not that we ever lived anywhere particularly hot to begin with, being from a small town in upstate New York, but my dad and I managed to stick out like a sore thumb. Perhaps it has something to do with my father spending most of his time working at the local butcher's shop, which was a few short miles down the street from our house. Many nights he would spend in the shop, rarely leaving at all from 7 to 9, preparing the pork, sausage, and beef in-house, cutting them down to shape to prepare for the next day of work. Oftentimes, his work kept him long enough in the day where I would hear the door unlock around midnight, head downstairs, and see a figure covered in bloody overalls and carrying a black, bloody bag of meat walk into the dark hallways, breathing slowly and putting the black bag on the table, and taking out whatever blood remains had been left from that day for his dinner. Something about the smell of the dried meat always bothered me as a kid, but I got used to it as the years went on, like how a farmer's son gets used to the smell of cow shit on a farm. You live with it for a while, and it becomes almost normal. Every year on my birthday, I'd ask the same question. Can we visit our home country? I'd like to see it for the first time. My father would kneel beside me and tell me, speaking in his typical low voice with breath cold as ice, "Son, there are things that are hard to explain. We are not welcome back home. But perhaps someday it could be safe to go again." I had hoped every year that one day it would change, that my father would come to me with the biggest smile I had ever seen and tell me, "Son, it is time to go home." But that day never came. It stayed the same hopeless dream of a young boy who wanted more. As I got into my late preteens, the kids in the neighborhood mocked me relentlessly for my parents from a young age, referring to me as the son of the slaughterer, as if he were a killer in a shitty B-horror movie. Richie White, who lived across the street from my father's work, even spoke of hearing sounds from my father's shop, inhumane sounds of screaming and weird sounds that ran through the night. How he saw people who entered my father's shop with him who never came out. The rumors themselves brought back memories of the bloody black bag and that awful meat stench that made me want to throw up everything I had inside of me. It was all just rumors, right? My father wasn't a killer. No, I knew him. He was a quiet man, a cold man, but he was never a killer. One night, I gathered up the courage to ask my father as he came in the kitchen, black bloody bag in hand, "Dad, you aren't bad, right? For killing animals?" My father, cold and icy as ever, measured me with his deep blue eyes. All men have their demon son, a willingness inside to act in ways they perhaps should not. I do what I do to survive, to provide for us, to keep our family going. Do you understand? I nodded firmly. Good boy, now, tell me true. Why you ask me such things? Did someone say something? I looked from left to right. I didn't want to get Richie in trouble. My father must have known something was up as he grabbed my face, measuring me as he usually did with a firm gaze and his cold voice. "Tell me the truth. Dennis, I need to know. Who was it?" I sighed. This was a fight I was never going to win. I bit my lip as the words tumbled out. "Richie White. He said he heard noises from inside your shop, noises that sounded like screaming and crying." Slowly, my father spoke one final time with a hint of perhaps sorrow mixed with pride. Ignore the man, son, he speaks lies. I run a proud business, as did your grandfather and his father before him. Do not let what others say affect you. You have a history to be proud of. Don't ever forget that, he said before quickly walking up to bed, before I had a chance to ask if I would inherit the shop one day. It wasn't one nightfall after that when Richie went missing after school. The police searched for him all over town, but found nothing, with a lack of evidence. The case got dropped, to the sadness of Richie's parents, who fought tooth and nail to have their son found. As the investigation concluded, my mind went back to Richie, and my heart sank. Had I killed him? But I shook my head. No. My father was no killer. He could never be. Would never be. Not him. Not the man who raised me. The idea made me sick to my stomach. My father wasn't a killer. How could I even think that? But somehow, it all made sense. I thought of the bloody black bag, the rumors of screams, of people disappearing. I had to know the truth, the cold, disgusting truth I would regret knowing for years to come. So I decided to see for myself. I took my bike, and I sped over to the shop. My heart leapt out of my chest as I rode, and I wondered, what would I see? Perhaps I would arrive, open the door to the meat locker, and see nothing but regular hanging meat. That's all it would be, right? Just meat, regular meat, nothing more. I had only come to prove to myself that nothing was going on. When I did make it to the store, I slowly walked the front all the way to the back. The meat somehow smelled worse here than it did at home, almost smoky and slightly pungent, like someone had created possibly the worst smelling stew in history and dipped it in shit for good measure. As I walked further, I heard something in the back. It was faint, a clink, clonk sound. Shit. I thought, of course, Dad is here. He is going to kill me. I almost turned back when I realized what the sound was. It was a sound of slicing meat. I knew it well from all the nights Dad sliced meat at home when he was too busy at work. This is my moment. I thought, one quick look. He will never notice, and I'll never have to think about it again. Slowly, I crept open the door, and inside I saw Richie lie on the table. His stomach had been cut open neatly from one end to the other in a straight line. All of his organs removed precisely from each and every section of his body. His eyes lay completely closed, his body still and white. And on the other side of the room, my father cut into a piece of organ. I was feeling much too ill by this point to even notice what part. Quickly I ran, my heart beating out of my chest as I tried to hold back pure vomit in my throat. My mind raced. My dad? Was he? No, he couldn't. Was he a cannibal? And Mom. Oh God, Mom. Did she know? What if I had to tell her? I almost threw up there and then at the thought when my father grabbed me by the shoulder roughly, eyeing me with a gaze I had never seen before. For once he looked sad, but happy? No, I was sure of it. It was a look of pleasure, a look of pure joy and pride hidden beneath sadness, as if he had just heard some fantastic news that would turn his life around, yet couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't help but notice a stain of blood on his lip as he spoke. My boy, I think it is time you learn who you really are. Slowly, my father took a step closer. We aren't like most families. I am sure you've been aware of that by now. I should have had this conversation with you much sooner, but I was unsure if you were ready. But it is time, I know that now. He took a deep breath in. A long time ago, my father was a butcher, just like I am. Same shop I own now, and I lived there too. We never had much money, but it was a simple life, the kind of life you accept because you have nothing else. In time, I became an assistant to my father, helping him in the butcher's shop, about your age, running the front to keep the line busy while my father worked on the meat. He hoped I would take over his shop one day, and perhaps I would have, had I not met your mother when she came to pick up an order her father had placed. She was beautiful, blonde hair, dark blue eyes like the sea, and a wonderful smile that you couldn't forget. We fell for each other head over heels that day and never looked back since. It was around that time one day, your grandfather asked me on a particularly slow day to come down and help in the back of the butcher's shop, and I saw what had been hiding from me. Inside, he was keeping bodies, feasting on them. I walked in just as he drained one from the neck, taking in his blood. I almost ran away, but he saw me just out the corner of his eye. Don't look away, he told me. You will have to do the same someday. He finished his meal and explained to me that many years ago, our family had come from a long line of vampires, that the meat shop was a front to keep, bodies inside, to use for meat and starve off the hunger, to prevent our secret from coming out. He explained to me that inside of us, our family, we had a hunger, a deep, uncontrollable hunger for blood, and that someday I would feel it too. Our curse, he called it, as if it was a disease. I think part of me knew, always knew that he had a secret. I just wasn't sure, nor did I ever want to find out. I almost fled there, and then, had I not realized that I had nowhere to run to, if I went to police, they'd never believe me. I mean, vampires? I would have sounded like a loon. Nor did I have any family outside of town I knew about. I bit my lip, and I accepted. I never told your mother. She would never understand. I love that woman with all my heart, and I couldn't bear for her to find out what I was capable of, who she really married. Someday you'll feel it too. Deep inside, you may already. I want you to help me as my father did, to keep our hunger at bay, so we can have a normal life. In disgust, I stepped back from my father. I held my throat, trying not to throw up. My father was a good man, a man who raised me and never hurt a fly. This was a good, honest, hard-working man. What the fuck is this? You want me to help you do this? Kill people and drink, and butcher them like animals? You are out of your fucking mind. This is disgusting. How could you ever do this? The words fell out of my mouth before I could even think about it. Somehow, they just appeared as I spoke to the man I thought I knew. At that moment, all the respect I lost from my father, and I don't think I knew it. I know you're upset, and I understand, but I have no other choice. We have a hunger, an unending hunger that we need to survive. It is this or die. Someday, you will know it too, and you will be unable to control it. You can deny who you are, but it will catch up with you. In that moment, I just ran as fast as I could until I could run no more. Soon, I had lost my dad, and I was free from the horrors I had known. All I could think to do was cry and mourn the life I had once known. It has been 15 years since. I live on my own now, far away from my hometown. I've tried to forget the whole thing. I live a normal life now, engaged to my girlfriend, nice job in finance. Probably wouldn't even know anything was wrong with me, but my father was right. I feel the hunger. A few years after I started to feel it, the intense hunger pains, the drive for blood and meat. Food started tasting less nourishing, more like nothingness, and more I craved blood. I don't remember when it started. It just did, like something inside me awoke and is never going back to sleep. So far, I have survived off draining animal blood from nearby farms, things most people chalk up to wild animals. But it is not enough. Something inside me always tells me I want more fresh human blood. I can only hope it won't come to that. Dad said I would understand one day that we are cursed with this, born into it, and die with it. I think I get it. God, I finally get it. Story 3. A missing hiker call changed how I take night shifts forever. I don't take solo night calls anymore. On paper, I'm still a ranger with the State Park Department. My badge says Senior Ranger. My contract says Backcountry Specialist. But after what happened last October, I started volunteering for every maintenance shift that keeps me within sight of a road and a crowd. There's an incident report for it. It's in a binder behind the front desk. Third shelf down, page for October 19th. If you flip to it, this is what you'd see. Ranger Carson Hale responded to an overdue hiker call from Cottonwood Wash Trailhead. Returned at 7:12 hours. Report of possible animal activity. Ongoing missing persons case. That's the neat version. The version for supervisors and lawyers. And anyone who needs closure that fits on a line. Everything else I'm putting here because I can't sleep when it's quiet anymore. That day started like every other shoulder season Thursday. I was at the station doing the usual nonsense, answering the same questions about whether we have bears, yes, whether we have wolves, no, and whether their dog could be off-leash, also no. I don't care how friendly he is. I filled out a maintenance request for the busted faucet by the campground. dug through the lost and found for a kid's left sandal, and try not to think too hard about how much of my job is being an underpaid hall monitor with a radio. We're a small park wedge between national forest and reservation land, a chunk of canyons and pinyon, dry creeks and sandstone ledges. You drive east from town, past the Family Dollar and the last Circle K, hit the brown sign for Cottonwood Wash State Park, and then it's 7 more miles on a two-lane that turns to washboard dirt if you miss a turn. October's our almost quiet month. Cool days, cold nights, tourists thinning out, but not gone. Enough people to keep the lights on, not enough to justify overtime. Around 6:30 p.m., I just poured the last of the coffee from the station pot into my dented stainless thermos. It was already lukewarm and tasted like metal and burnt beans, but I'm not picky. I screwed the lid on, told myself I'd reheat it later, and we both know I wasn't going to. I was halfway through the shift change checklist when dispatch crackled over the base station. Unit 3, you still at the station? I thumbed my handheld. Yeah, go ahead. Got a call from county sheriff. Overdue hiker. Vehicle registered to a Matthew Klein, age 34. Parked at Cottonwood Wash Trailhead since 9:17 this morning. No contact. Girlfriend called in about 20 minutes ago. I glanced at the wall clock. 1942. Outside the office window, the sky was a strip of dull purple over the ridge. Sun already gone. Morales, night shift, was still tied up on a poaching complaint up in the north sector. She'd told me over the radio an hour earlier she was knee-deep in camo idiots and shell casings. All right, I said. I'll check the lot. See if he signed in. Maybe he just took the loop slow. You sure? Dispatch sounded tired but concerned. You'd be solo out there, 3. Just a quick sweep to the first marker. I said, I won't go stupid deep. The lie came out easy. It always does when you tell yourself you're just checking. I keep my pack under the desk, half out of habit and half, because if I put away somewhere proper, I'll forget something. First aid kit, trauma shears, Sam splint, extra water, tarp, a coil of paracord. I always call it bowling when I show the junior ranger kids, even though it's not. I know it's not. My brain grabs it wrong. Not every single time I got an audience. I slung the pack over one shoulder, grabbed the SAR radio and a printed map from the rack, even though I can draw the trails from memory, and sign myself out on the board. Carson, Cottonwood Wash, overdue hiker, 1950. The drive out felt longer than usual. Headlights carved through sage and rabbit brush, catching the odd jackrabbit frozen in the beam before it bolted. The pavement gave up about 4 miles out. The truck bounced as tires hit hard-packed washboard. I passed the old CCC bathhouse ruins on the left. A crumbling line of stone and a rusted interpretive sign. I always think it's WPA work until I kneel down and see the nail head stamped 1937 CCC. And remember, I've had that exact thought before. Nobody else was out there. No other vehicles. No porch lights on the distant ranch houses. No campfire glow. Just a road and the dark shapes of mesas, hemming it in. The handheld road on the passenger seat by my thermos. Volume low. Dispatch chatter, a tinny murmur. The coffee had gone from lukewarm to cold. I took a swallow anyway out of habit and grimaced. I pulled into the Cottonwood Wash Trailhead lot at 2003. One vehicle sat there, a blue Subaru Outback with a rental barcode sticker on the rear window. Thin coat of dust, no tracks behind the tires. Hood cold when I put my hand on it. I swung the truck, so the headlights washed over the bulletin board and trailhead sign. The board was a usual mess. Faded fire danger meter. Watch for rattlesnakes poster. A missing dog flyer someone had taped up 3 months ago. The wind barely moved. The cottonwoods along the dry creek might as well have been painted on. I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on, and walked over to the sign-in box. We don't force people to log in and out, but we encourage it. Sometimes it saves hours. Sometimes it doesn't help at all. The sheet inside was almost full. I flipped past the earlier entries until I saw it. Name, Matthew Klein timeout, 9:30 destination. Loop to ridge overlook expected return by 5. I don't know why that by 5 snag in my head. People usually scribble afternoon or don't bother. The way he wrote it made it look like a promise. Like he'd told someone, I'll be out by 5. I swear. Unit 3 at Cottonwood Trailhead. I said into the radio. Subject's vehicle present. Name matches sign in. No sign of subject at lot. Copy 3. Dispatch answered. You requesting secondary unit? I looked out at the trail sign. The dark mouth of the path dropping into the wash. The part of my brain that likes checklists and procedures whispered you should wait. The other part, that loud SAR part that starts writing worst-case scenarios the second a hiker is late, was already picturing a broken ankle at the first switchback. A guy sitting in the dark slowly getting hypothermic because I didn't want to lose sleep. Negative for now, I said. I'll hike the first mile marker. See if I pick up his tracks. If he went out at 9, he should have been back before dark. Copy. Check-in every 30. I clipped the radio back to my vest, tightened my pack straps. The air had that in-between temperature where you know the real cold is waiting just out of sight. The trail into Cottonwood Wash starts as a gentle slope of packed sand and loose rock, then drops into the creek after a quarter mile. In daylight, it's a casual stroll. At night, even with a good light, your world shrinks to a tunnel, the circle in front of your boots, and then nothing. I stepped past the trailhead sign and felt that shift I always do. The parking lot behind me became a rectangle of lesser darkness. Ahead was just a beam in the unknown. I picked up his tracks before the first switchback. Decent hiking boots, not fashion ones. Deep tread, maybe size 10. The sandy stretches between rock patches held his prints like ink. You get used to reading people in their tracks, whether they walked or jogged, how heavy their pack might have been, whether they were sightseeing or marching. For the first half mile, Matthew Klein read like a normal guy out for a long loop. Center of the trail, steady stride, no dragging, no weird pauses. Nothing that said panic. Nothing that said intoxicated or injured. The canyon was colder than the lot. The rock walls held the cool and let heat bleed off fast. My breath fogged in the beam in short bursts. Somewhere up on the rim, a coyote yipped once and then shut up. I waited to hear the others answer. They didn't. At the first mile marker, a battered wooden post with one carved into it and a strip of reflective tape peeling away. I checked my watch. 20:26. Unit 3, I said into the radio. At mile marker 1, subject's trail still visible and consistent, continuing toward ridge overlook. Static hissed. Then dispatch's voice slid through, muffled and thin. Opie 3. Signals get ing spotty. Check and at ridge. Say again. I turned the volume up. More static. For a second, I heard my own voice loop back at me. Tinny and warped. Ridge. That happens sometimes in the canyons too. Radios bouncing off rock faces, catching their own echo. I told myself that's all it was. Thumbed the side of the radio like that would make a difference, and kept going. Half a mile past a marker, the story in the dirt changed. It started small, a single step off the pack center of the trail, a deeper imprint like he'd stumbled and caught himself. Then another, then a run of short, choppy steps that veered toward the right, toward the darker line of brush hugging the wash wall. I swept my light ahead, slowly. The beam caught on a long scuff where something heavy had slid sideways, gouging a shallow trench in sand. Matthew's boot print overlapped the end of it, toes dug in like he'd pushed hard. I crouched, fingers brushing the disturbed sand. The trench went both ways, as if something had been dragged, stopped, and then dragged again. Beside it, half softened by wind, was another print. My first thought was coyote, then big dog, then something gave up. It was a bare foot. It wasn't right, though. The toes were too long, with an odd curve to them. The arch of the foot dipped narrow and deep, like it belonged to someone who'd never worn shoes in their life. But the heel print was wrong, too, set in a way that didn't match the weight distribution I'm used to seeing. The deepest point wasn't the ball or heel, but along the outer edge, as if whoever belonged to roll their weight there. I felt my stomach tighten. People hike barefoot. I've seen older locals do it, and I've seen social media idiots do it, so they can say they did. But you don't see bare human feet out here at 11 p.m. in October. My light found a second bare footprint farther along, cutting across the trail at an angle, then a third, half on rock, half in sand. They moved with a strange, loping stride, parallel to Matthew's for a while, then angling closer. I swallowed. Could be nothing. I said out loud, which is dumb, but people talk to themselves alone in the field more than they admit. Could be some kid messing around. Could be erosion. Could be me reading shadows. The wind at my back shifted. For a second, just a second, it brought a smell with it that didn't belong out here. Sour and coppery and hot, like a butcher shop that hadn't been cleaned right. Then it was gone. The hair on my arms rose under my sleeves. I swept my light around. Canyon walls, brush, the path behind me. Nothing but rock and dark. Matthew, I called, voice louder than before. Ranger service. If you can hear me, yell or bang on something. My words traveled up and out, bounced back thinner, shredded by distance. No other sound answered. I followed the tracks. They left the main trail at a break in the rock wall. I've walked past 100 times without thinking. The wash narrows there, and there's a slope of loose rock leading up to a gap between two big sandstone blocks. You can see it on the topo map as a little side drainage, but nobody puts it on the brochures. Matthew's boots had climbed it in a hurry. Slips, slides, toe digs like he was scrambling. The bare prints follow with a steadier, almost lazy step. Each toe splayed in the gravel like they were gripping. Protocol says, don't leave a marked trail on a solo night search unless there's imminent danger. That sentence was in the back of my head. So was the DA's voice from a training video about unnecessary exposure to risk. But walking away when the tracks clearly went up that slope would mean, if he was lying broken 20 yards beyond it, I'd chosen my own safety over his life. Try clocking out with that in your chest. So I went. The scree rolled under my boots with every step. Tiny rock falls rattling downslope. Dust got in my teeth. I kept my light low, checking each place I planned to put my weight. At the top, the gap funneled into a narrow side canyon I'd only ever glanced at in daylight. A vertical slit of shadow between red walls, choked with scrub oak, fallen branches, and old flood debris. At night, it felt wrong is the only word that fits. The air changed as soon as I stepped through. The faint breeze from the main wash died. The temperature dropped a couple degrees. Even the starlight thinned out. The walls leaned over just enough to box it in. Matthew's boots and the bear prints ran nearly side by side now, sometimes overlapping. Here and there, small darker spots dotted the sand. I knew what they were before I reached down and touched one with a gloved fingertip. Blood looks almost black in flashlight beams. Matthew, I yelled again, throat tighter this time. If you're hurt, shout. I'm here to help you. Something answered me. Not words. Not quite. It rose up from somewhere ahead and above. A thin keening that sounded like it had been fed through too many speakers in a row and come out damaged. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't the wind. It had the cadence of a sob, but none of the shape. It bounced off the canyon walls and came back in fragments. My skin crawled. I told myself it could be wind tearing past a crack in the rock. Could be an injured animal. Could be anything besides the thing my brain was edging toward. My body didn't care what label I put on it. My feet were already moving toward the sound. I don't know how far that side canyon goes in daylight. At night, distance just stops meaning anything. My watch said I walked another 10 minutes. My lungs and legs said 30. Around a bend, the walls peeled back into a bowl-shaped clearing, maybe 30 yards across. The floor was a mess of scrub, deadfall, and old flood lines. In the center, half collapsed and furred with lichen, was a ring of stone. It wasn't one of our fire rings. Too big, too tall, too deliberate. Needed chest-high slabs of rock, set in a near-perfect circle, all leaning inward just a little, like they'd been shoved and decided not to fall after all. Some had shallow marks carved into them, so worn you couldn't tell if they'd ever meant anything. I stopped on the edge of it, pulse thudding in my throat. My light picked up a bright slash of color against one upright stone. For a second, my brain said trash. Then it clicked. A torn scrap of neon orange fabric. High-vis nylon. The kind every REI mannequin wears in October. It was stuck to the rough rock with something dried and dark. The edges were ragged, as if it had been chewed or shredded by hand. Near it, at the base of the stone, the sand showed a wide smear, as if something heavy had been dragged and pivoted there. Matthew's boot prints walked up to that spot and ended. The bare prints didn't. They were everywhere, in the dust, on the flat stones, circling the ring, doubling back over themselves. Some were deeper. The toes clawed and like whatever had made them had pushed hard, maybe to leap. That broken keening sound rose again. This time it came from above me. I tilted my head back, lifting the light. At first my brain tried to make it a tree branch. A human shadow. Anything. Something clung to a narrow ledge maybe 10 feet above the ring. Pale limbs bent at angles that made my joints ache just looking. It was pressed flat to the rock in a way that didn't seem like it should be possible. My beam slid over it once, twice, before the details assembled into the idea of a body. Its head turned before the rest of it did, jerking around quick and then stopping too suddenly. The eyes caught my light and reflected it back, flat and bright, like marbles. It wore a parted jacket, neon orange, ripped almost in half down the center. One sleeve hung empty and shredded. The torso under was narrow, too narrow. Ribs showed under skin that looked too tight. But in other places the skin bunched and folded like it had extra it didn't know what to do with. The face. I still can't quite hold the face in my head. When I try, I get pieces. There was a jaw, eye sockets, cheekbones, but everything was a little off, like someone had assembled a face from memory and gotten the spacing wrong. The nose sat too high. One eye socket was wider than the other. The mouth sloped, higher on one side, lower on the other, as if whoever it cut it hadn't drawn the line straight. Its lips moved. That thin, wrong sobbing noise came out, but the mouth barely opened. The sound didn't match the shape. For a few seconds we just stared at each other, my light pinning it on the ledge. It staring back with its head tilted at the same angle as mine. Then it let go. It dropped straight down into the stone circle. No scramble, no preparing for impact. It just released and hid in a crouch. I waited for the thump, for gravel scattering. Nothing. Or if there was a sound, I didn't hear it through the thudding in my ears. Up close, the smell hit me like a wall. Wet fur, copper, and something else. Old earth, maybe. The way a cellar smells when it's been shut up for too long. I don't remember deciding to unclasp my holster, but suddenly my handgun was in my hand. My fingers slick on the grip. Training says you back away slowly. Keep your weapon up. Keep your voice calm. You don't talk to unknown animals like they're people. I heard myself say, Matthew? Anyway, the thing's head twitched to the side. The movement was too sharp, like someone had cut a frame out of its animation. Its eyes flicked down to the gun, then back to my face. Its mouth worked. The sound coming out changed. Less like a broken sob. More like someone tried to push air through a throat that wasn't built right. Matt, it said. The word came out crushed and stretched, like someone had taken a recording and pulled the waveform. The T was barely there. The vowel dragged too long. It sounded like someone trying to talk underwater. I can help you. I heard myself stammer. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Just stay where you are. I took a step back. It took one forward. The bare feet left clean prints in the dust between the stones. Up close, the skin there looked wrong too. Too thin and shiny in some spots. Thick and almost scaly in others. On one ankle there was a faint line, a seam where the texture changed abruptly from something smooth and human to something rougher, like animal hide. My flashlight beam shook. The stones cast hard-edged shadows over its body, hiding pieces of it, and then showing them again in a stuttering rhythm as I tried to keep the light steady. Somewhere behind me, far out in the main wash, the wind started up again. It slid around the core of the canyon, and over the bowl, cold and thin on the sweat at the back of my neck. Stop, I said, raising the gun. Don't come any closer. I'm not kidding. The thing's jaw flexed. Its lips peeled back a fraction too far, exposing teeth that were mostly the right shape and size but sat just a little off. One turned, one slightly higher than the rest. The skin at the corners of its mouth tore as it stretched, hairline cracks opening, and leaking something dark that wasn't the bright, fresh red I expected. The keening cut off. The silence that dropped in its place was heavy in a way air shouldn't be. Then, very clearly, it said, "Help." Not like someone begging, like someone testing a word they'd practiced. I'd love to tell you I fired, that I put 2 rounds center mass, that it dropped, that we hauled a body out and tagged it and sent it off to the lab, and now I can point to a report and say, this is what that was. Instead, the part of me that has nothing to do with training, the old part, the pre-animal part, took over. I turned and ran. The next few minutes exist in my memory like a series of still photos. My boots hitting the canyon floor, my pack slamming between my shoulders, my flashlight beam jerking over rocks and dead branches, and a mouse of side cracks. Behind me, something moved. At first there was a noise like someone pulling themselves free from deep mud, a wet suction sound. Then the patter of feet, more than 2, faster than I wanted to believe anything on 2 legs could move on that terrain. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, my brain would freeze and my body would follow. The narrow part of the side canyon came up too fast. I clipped my shoulder on one wall, bounced off the other, skinning my knuckles. Pain flared bright and stupid and somehow helped, because it made everything feel real again. The main wash opened ahead, and a slice of slightly lighter dark. The strip of sky above got wider. Stars were just pinpricks between canyon rims, but they were there. My radio exploded with static against my chest. "Son? Carson, you copy? We lost you on 3, are you?" "3. I yelled. No call sign, discipline left. "Unit 3. I am in Cottonwood Side Canyon. I've encountered..." I had to swallow to get the next words out. "Encountered something, possible subject, unknown animal. I am retreating, requesting immediate." Static swallowed the rest. The radio screeched in my ear. For a second, under the noise, I heard another voice, my own or something mimicking it, repeat "unknown" back at me, stretched and warped. Behind me, closer than I wanted to know, that broken voice called out, "Help, help, car." It said my name like it was chewing it. I don't remember deciding to slow down. I do remember my knee blowing up with pain as I misjudged a step, and my right foot skidded on loose gravel. I went down hard. Something in my knee popped, and the world went right around the edges. I grabbed a juniper branch and used it to haul myself up. My leg screamed. The smart move would have been to stop, get my bearings, maybe find cover. I kept moving. You can't sprint blind through a canyon and expect to survive. Every instinct screamed run as fast as you can. The rest of me knew if I broke into a full panic scramble, I'd miss a turn and go off into a side ravine or over a ledge. So I forced myself to do the thing I always tell new rangers in training. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Or, however that saying actually goes, it feels like garbage when something is chasing you, but it keeps you alive. Watch the trail. I muttered, breath ragged. Landmarks. You know this place. You've been here 100 times. The first mile marker came into view like a hallucination, reflective tape winking in my beam. If I had spare oxygen, I probably would have laughed. Halfway, I told myself. Just halfway. Keep going. Something moved at the edge of my light, up on the slope. I swung the beam toward it. For a second, I thought the juniper trunks were playing tricks on me. Then it stepped out from behind one. It stood on the slope above the trail, maybe 20 yards away. The torn orange of the jacket glowed faintly against its chest. Its limbs looked longer than they had in the stone circle. Joints set at slightly different angles, like the act of moving had rearranged them. Its head was cocked. Its eyes didn't glow like an animal's this time. They just absorbed the light. Too still, too intent. We stared at each other for 1, 2 heartbeats. Then it moved, not toward me, parallel. It began to walk the contour line, up on the slope, matching my position as I started down trail again. Same pace, same distance. Every time I flicked the light that way, it was there, just outside the center of the beam. I've watched mountain lions shadow people before. I've seen coyotes trot along a ridge. keeping a hunter in sight. This was like that and not like that at all. There was no curious tilt, no animal caution. It felt clinical, like it was observing, like it had decided running me down wasn't as interesting as seeing what I'd do. I kept my eyes mostly on the trail, checking every few seconds that it was still there and not suddenly closer. My heart hammered. My knee ached with every step. The urge to bolt full out almost shook my teeth. Morales' voice came back to me out of nowhere. Us at the picnic table behind the station on a dead afternoon, her rolling a cigarette between her fingers, talking about the stories her grandmother used to tell. Stuff out there that walks on 2 legs and 4, and you don't say the name, she'd said. You don't look at it if you can help it. You sure as hell don't talk to it. If it knows you know, that's when you've got a problem. I'd made some dumb joke about already having enough to worry about with tourists. I didn't feel like laughing now. I didn't talk. I didn't raise the radio again. I didn't shoot. The trail curved left, then right. The rectangle of open sky that meant the trailhead lot was close crept into view in front of me, pale compared to the canyon. Above me, the thing stopped. I looked up before I could stop myself. It stood at the very edge of the slope, toes almost over the drop, in my light. Its eyes had gone reflective again, picking up just enough glow to look wrong. Its chest rose and fell once, then it opened its mouth. The sound that came out wasn't a scream the way you think of a scream. It was a steady, high, piercing tone, a sound so sharp it made the fillings of my molars ache. It didn't rise or fall. It just held, like a test tone in your inner ear. Underneath it, I heard something else, layered, fainter, a murmur that might have been voices stacked on top of each other, like a crowd recorded from too far away. Some sounded like they were crying, some like they were laughing, but none of the emotion matched the tone. It was all wrong. The world narrowed to that noise in the rectangle of the trailhead lot ahead. My legs did the choosing for me. I ran. The tone cut off midstream, like someone had yanked a cable. The sudden silence was almost a physical hit. I sprinted the last stretch, my knee protesting with every jolt. Adrenaline did what ibuprofen can't. Then I was out. I burst into the parking lot like I'd stepped through a door. The truck, the pit toilet, the bullet-riddled NO shooting sign, everything ordinary and stupid and real, appeared all at once. My flashlight beam slammed into the side of the blue Subaru, bounced the bulletin board, swung over the hood of my truck. My thermos was still on the seat, where I'd left it, silver catching the light, for some reason that almost undid me more than anything else. The radio at my shoulder clicked. "Free? Carson? You copy? We lost you for a good 10 minutes there." My knees finally gave out. I dropped onto the dirt by the truck, one hand catching the bumper to keep myself from face planting. The radio dug into my chest where the harness had shifted, the antenna jabbing under my jaw. My boot knocked the thermos off the seat when I leaned in. It hit the floorboard with a dull thunk I felt in my teeth. 3, I gasped. At trailhead. I am at the lot. Subject not found. Unknown animal in area. I repeat, unknown animal, aggressive behavior. Request backup. Lots of backup. I wasn't proud of how that last bit came out. Copy 3. Dispatch said, clearly exhaling into the mic, Morales is en route. County deputies notified. ETA 20 to 25. Stay in your vehicle. Do not re-enter the trail. Affirmative, I said, and it came out more like a wheeze than a word. I hauled myself upright, using the truck's side mirror. My reflection looked worse than I felt. Sweat plastered dark hair in my forehead. A smear of blood on one knuckle. Dust all up my pants. Eyes wide. The Subaru sat silent and patient. For reasons I didn't examine too closely right then, I walked over to the driver's side and cupped my hands to peer inside. The door was locked. Through the glass, I could see a rental agreement on the passenger seat with a logo from a Phoenix airport rental place, a half-empty Arrowhead water bottle, and a dog-eared Ram McNally Atlas folded open to northern Arizona. On the back seat was an orange jacket, or what was left of it. The main body of it had been stuffed in there in a hurry, still zipped. Both sleeves were shredded, long diagonal tears running from cuff to shoulder. The nylon was stiff and dark in patches. Someone had tried to wipe it off and given up. The drying made it pucker. I stared at it for long enough that Morales' headlights coming up the road made me jump. I didn't tell Morales everything that night. I told her I'd followed the subject's tracks to an unmarked side canyon, heard what I thought was an injured person, found blood and torn clothing and signs of a struggle. I told her something large had shadowed me on the way out, that I hadn't seen it clearly, that it might have been a mountain lion acting strange. She looked at my face for a second longer than was comfortable, then nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Animal. Fine. You're limping. You're not going back in." The deputies pulled in behind her, doors slamming, radios chirping. Their floodlights turned the trailhead into a stage. I watched them fan out with rifles and spotlights, young, confident, joking under their breath, because that's how you keep nerves down. We ran a full search the next day. Dogs, volunteers, every ranger we could spare. The sun was bright, the sky cloudless. The side canyon looked smaller in daylight, its shadows shallow. We found the stone ring. We found the blood. We found more of the jacket jammed into a rock crack, like someone had tried to hide it. We didn't find Matthew. The dogs didn't like the circle. They'd approached to about 10 feet, then balk and whine. Hackles up, one of the deputies joked about bad vibes. Morales didn't laugh. The official story settled on probable animal predation. The report lists cougar as a likely culprit with one of those cover-your-ass lines. Though no conclusive physical evidence of the animal was recovered, behavior and sign are consistent with known predation events. If you read the report, it sounds tidy. Guy goes hiking, meets big cat, doesn't come home. Happens more than people think. The messy part stayed in my head. His girlfriend came out twice over the next month. The first time she met with the sheriff, nodded through all the phrases. Ongoing investigation, low probability, will keep you updated. The second time, she drove out alone in a dusty Corolla and stood at the trailhead for a long time, just looking at the sign. I was coming off patrol and didn't want to bother her. She came over to me instead. "Were you the ranger on call?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Carson." She shook my hand, gripped tight, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Matt's. He likes to push things," she said, staring at the bulletin board. "Always has. But he's not stupid. He told me he'd be out before dark. He texted me from the lot. He signed out by 5. I said, then wished I hadn't. It sounded petty out loud. She nodded once like that hurt. "That's him. Little promises." She pulled something from her bag, a scrap of paper, folded small, and pinned it to the corner of the corkboard with a thumbtack she brought. Her hands were shaking. Later, after she drove off, I went to see what it said. 3 words in uneven handwriting. It spared me. Understand? For a second my brain just shrugged. Then it sorted through its filing cabinet and pulled out a memory from months before. A different call, different landscape. Central Idaho. Snowmelt below, a slide path. We found a man standing in water up to his waist. Lips almost blue, pants shredded, no boots. He refused food, refused to give name, just stared at the tent wall, and repeated the same line over and over. It spared me. It spared me. It spared me. He might have added something else. I can't remember the exact order now. Shock scrambles people. Either way, that phrase stuck. I chalked it up to hypothermia. People say weird things when they're that cold. Now, staring at that note with the tack barely holding it, my skin crawled. I didn't tell her any of that. What was I going to do? Say, "Hey, your boyfriend and some half-frozen stranger might have meant the same thing. Congratulations?" I took the note down 2 weeks later when it started to curl and bleed ink from the weather. I put it in my desk drawer. It's still there. Sometimes I knock my thermos against that drawer by accident in the mornings, and the sound makes my shoulders tense before I remember why. There's one more part one haven't told anyone. About a week after we officially called a search and shifted the documentation over to recovery unlikely, I went back to Cottonwood Wash on a day off. Middle of the day, blue sky, no clouds, temperatures in the high 60s. Nothing creepy about it on paper. I didn't sign in on the sheet. I know. Practice what you preach. I told myself if anyone asked, I'd say I forgot. I walked the main trail with just my day pack. No radio. My knee ached halfway to the mile marker. A deep dull throb that still flares when the weather changes. I told myself that was why I was breathing harder, not nerves. When I reached the point where Matthew's prints had left the trail, I stopped. The side canyon, entranced, looked smaller in daylight. Just another scruffy cut in the rock, choked with scrub oak and old flood trash. If you didn't know, you'd walk right past it forever. I didn't go in. I stood at the mouth of it and listened. At first, nothing. Just wind moving through the main wash. A couple of scrub jays arguing up canyon. My heart ticking my ears. Then, from somewhere deeper in, far enough that it couldn't be an echo from the main trail, I heard a sound I'd been waiting for without admitting it. A thin, strangled call. Help. Almost clear this time. The consonants hit in the right places. The vowel didn't drag as much. It didn't sound like begging. It sounded like someone practicing a word until they liked how it felt. I left. I didn't run, but it was a close thing. People online love to argue about labels. Skinwalker, Wendigo, Crawler, Fleshgate, whatever the latest YouTube channel calls it. They want a name so they can categorize it. Put it in a box with lore and rules and bullet points. You're probably wondering what I think it was. I'm not Navajo. I didn't grow up with those stories. In a way, I have the right to explain them. Morales did. I've seen her face tighten when tourists throw the S word around like it's a mascot. I won't call it that. That's not my word. I'll tell you what I know. I've worked around mountain lions, black bears, feral hogs. I've seen what coyotes do to calves. I know the difference between an animal hunting, because it's hungry and something toying with you. What watched me in that canyon wasn't just thinking about eating. It was studying. It moved like it was still figuring out how to wear what it was wearing. Like it had put on a skin, maybe more than one. And the seams didn't quite match. The voice it used didn't belong to a single throat. It sounded like it was made out of pieces. And when it said my name, I'm sure one thing. It wasn't repeating it back blindly. It was trying it on. These days, when overdue hiker call comes in near dusk and dispatch says Cottonwood and Trailhead in the same sentence, I suddenly remember paperwork I've been putting off, or a training module I promised to finish, or my knee starts acting up. The younger rangers roll their eyes. They tell me I'm getting soft. Morales just gives me a look like she's not sure if she wants to know why. On the nights I can't duck it, and I find myself driving past the Cottonwood Wash State Park sign, past the CCC ruins, past a bulletin board with a fresh stack of sign-in sheets. I keep my eyes on the road. I don't look at the gap in the rock wall where the side canyon starts. I don't glance at the slope where something once walked parallel to me, matching my pace. And when the radio crackles in that stretch, picking up half a word or my own voice delayed and warbling, I turn the volume up just enough to drown out anything else that might be trying to learn how to say my name. Story 4. Equinox. My parents had me when I was very young. Like very young, right out of high school. When you're that age, I guess it feels like everything matters and your choices will last the rest of your life. I just wish they'd lasted more than a few years. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized just how much they were children, unprepared for their own children. But here we are. Mom especially wasn't. I had no idea how much she struggled every single day. Why she always looked tired and sick whenever I saw her. Why she breathed funny and never showed her teeth when she smiled. I used to be mad at her for being so absent from my life. But now I understand just how hard she tried, every single day. And my dad, to keep me sheltered from seeing her at her worst. He'd take me and my teddy bear Nellie on these long drives late at night with the windows down. And I'd fall asleep in the back seat to the rumble of the truck and the cool, fresh air to drain out the stuffy smoke from the apartment. He did that so often I had no clue when I woke up one day when I was 5, and it was morning and we were still driving. He had one hand on the wheel and the other holding his phone to his head. I looked out the bed of the truck and saw bags of stuff, mine and his, but not hers. I overheard the last thing he said over the phone. I'm glad you think so. It's what's best for her. And you, we'll see you when you can. I love you too. He tapped off the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat, catching a glimpse of me in the rear view mirror. He looked over his shoulder with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was always struck with just how blue his eyes always were, bright and shiny. But today they were as red as the flannel shirt he always wore, like he hadn't gotten a wink of sleep. And I guess he didn't. When he grinned, his sharp canines poked out from under his lips, like a papa bear. Hey, Kit Kat, how you feeling? I rubbed my crusty eyes and hugged Nellie. I'm hungry. We'll stop somewhere soon. We've only got a couple more hours to go. I looked out the window to see miles of fields of wheat, rolling in the wind like a golden sea. I'd never been here before. Where are we going? You know how Mommy and Daddy always said we wanted to move to a farm? I remember a kid's book they read me all the time about a farm and all these animals like cows and horses and ducks that my dad would do the best voices for. They'd read and Dad said we'd have one of our own someday with all the animals. All the cows, the horses, the chickens, the pigs, and ducks. I always insisted there'd be ducks. They'd say we grow all the food we could eat and have everything we ever needed. A real home for just us three. And the kind of thing I couldn't help but believe at that age. He continued, well, Daddy found one, way out in the country, away from that big, noisy, stinky town. We got the farm, sweetie. I was so happy, but something was missing. Whereas Mommy, it took him a second to answer. You know Mommy's really sick. She's always sick. I was annoyed. I didn't understand. Well, she's finally starting to get better. Really better, for real this time. She just needs some time to be with friends who can make her better. And when she's better, we'll all be at the farm together. How's that sound, Katie? Sounds awesome. Yeah, does it sound awesome? Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'd say that a lot in a deep, funny voice I never got was a Kool-Aid man. It just always made me laugh. And when I did, I saw his face in the rear view mirror. This time he smiled for real. I spent the next 2 hours talking his ear off, asking him every single animal I knew that would or wouldn't be there. I barely noticed we were stopping by the time I got to the last, most important one. Will there be a dragon at the farm? No, we can't have a dragon at the farm, sweetie. Why not? Because they'd burn all the crops, and they'd scare away all the horses and cows. I was devastated. I asked quieter, could we have a little dragon? He stopped and took the keys out of the ignition, leaning over A&S back to me in his seat. Dead serious. I'll tell you what, you get to keep any little dragon you find at this farm. But you gotta clean up all the fire, all the ash, all the dragon poop. Got it. He held out what I thought was the biggest hand in the world for me to shake. I held out a pinky. Deal, I offered. His eyes flared with genuine concern for a second before he smirked and hooked his massive pinky against mine. Deal. Now let's get inside. I jumped outside and looked around. The most overwhelming feeling I had was disappointment in this old, barren farmstead that clearly hadn't been lived in for years. An old gray house, a brown, faded barn, and no animals in sight. Where are they? Dad walked around the truck and stooped down to meet my eye line. The animals will be here. We just gotta grow the food for them first. Just like he scooped me up and sat me on his arm. I gotta whip something up for you. I could never help to share in his smile. His front teeth were a bit crooked, like one was always fighting to get in front of the other, and their constant fight led to a chip on the inside of the front one. I know that wasn't how it happened, but that's what my imagination dictated. I never found out the real reason they were like that. If there was any, I looked out to the field of short, brown stalks of what must have been corn, long out of any farmer's care, left to the rats and crows and the cruel elements of summer. We had a lot of work ahead of us to make this place livable again for the animals. And then I saw it, out in the middle of the field of dead crops, tied and suspended up on its post. A lonely scarecrow. I don't think I had ever seen a scarecrow in real life, outside of Wizard of Oz and happy story picture books of farms. Dad always said that when I grow up, I looked just like Dorothy, like my mom did. I loved Scarecrow the best. This one looked nothing like him. Its clothes were a pair of denim overalls and a green plaid shirt, dusty and weathered from however long it was left there. The straw that stuffed its insides poked out of its shirt collar and sleeves, as well as tears in its chest where the crows had pecked away at it. In place of its right hand was a long, rusty sickle that curved out from its wrist like an oversized pirate's hook. But its head was a half-carved jack-o'-lantern, but the sharp, triangular cuts that made the face were green and molded and round as flies came and went. It looked soft like no pumpkin should, starting to droop and slump over its shoulders and chest. It looked sad, but what I remember most is the long orange strings of pulp and seeds hanging from the eyes and mouth. I hated that scarecrow. I hated to look at it, but I hated more having my back to it. And whenever I couldn't help but to look and see where it was even harder to look away. I asked Dad so many times to please get rid of it. He'd look down and shake his head and tell me how much it creeped him out too before saying, "Kit Kat, when we have more corn than we know what to do with, crows are going to try and steal it from us. Mr. Scarecrow's there to scare the crows away. Do you understand?" I'd nod and pretend I did, only to pester him again after however long he was at work on the land, fixing up the house or the barn. I can't imagine now how much was on his mind, but he had days and days of work to distract himself with. All I had was my thoughts, Nellie, a creepy old farmhouse with too many rooms, and that goddamn scarecrow. There wasn't a single room in a house that didn't have a window, and my dad said I could have any one of them I wanted for my own bedroom, even up to the loft. I insisted on the ground floor, the one right next to his. Looking back, I know the one concession I could have given him was a room of his own. I didn't sneak into every night when I got scared. But even with Nellie and Dad in the very next room, I was scared every night. Every night. When the moon and the stars were shining bright and my room was lit with a soft blue glow, I'd look out my window into the field, and I'd see the silhouette of that pumpkin-head scarecrow swaying slowly on its post whichever way the wind blew, its long hook hand shining in the moonlight. Every time I'd look at that rotting thing, it seemed to look back, swiveling on its post as if to turn slowly to wherever I was. I'd hold Nellie as close to me as I could, breathing in her softness, and eventually, as always, my racing mind would run out and my exhaustion would win over my fear. I'd always wish that in the morning it had be gone, replaced with a nicer one, or just gone for good. But it was always the first thing I saw when I'd wake up too. For weeks, it was like that before my dad's handiwork really started to take shape. One afternoon, he placed a space heater on the wall opposite my bed. In the storeroom, he found stuff for pumpkin pie and served it as dessert alongside a ham and a big bowl of applesauce. He was wearing his typical jeans and red flannel, but his whole air was different. How happy he was. Finally, sitting down to eat, he smiled his wonderful, crooked smile. "Do you know what's special about today?" I genuinely didn't know. I shook my head. "You are 6 years old today. And what's more is you get to learn a new word." I leaned forward to hear him better across the dinner table, while also basking in the scent of pie. He leaned forward too, resting his arms on the table, just behind his plate. "Equinox." I repeated the word, wondering what it meant. It means equal night, and it's when the sun and moon have had the exact same amount of time in the sky, down to the second. It's when summer ends and fall begins, and that's when you were born, Kit Kat. So, what do you want for your birthday? Where's Mom? I don't think he expected that. He took a deep breath and fidgeted his hands, and looked back at me. Mom's okay. She's still with friends, still getting better. Can we call her? "I'm sorry, sweetie, not right now. But I promise we'll see her soon." He always said that whenever I asked. The answer never changed, no matter how closer soon got. He never told me what was wrong, why we never talked about her, why she couldn't call. I was just so mad. I pushed my plate away and grabbed Nellie and ran to my room. "Katie!" I heard him yell out behind me. I slammed the door and stayed in, curled into a ball with Nellie on my bed, holding her as close as I could, watching the sun go down. The light from the hallway and the creaks of the wood told me that Dad was just outside my room, leaning against the door on silence. It was like that for a few quiet minutes. before he finally left, in the dying light. I saw him go into the barn, doing whatever last working calls a day. And for the last time, I fell asleep to the sight of that scarecrow, staring, swaying back and forth, arms and sickle outstretched across its post. I woke up in a cold sweat from a nightmare I didn't remember, and the warm air emanating from the space heater. I could think or feel in that moment was how unbelievably dry my throat was. I touched my feet to the cold wood boards and zombie marched to the bathroom at the end of the long hallway. The TV in the living room was glowing with whatever show, and I saw my dad's jeans and boots slumped into the recliner. I drank from the faucet for as long as I felt I could and wiped the cold water from my chin. Walking back to my room, I opened the door and there was my bed, Nellie saving my place to sleep, the window, the bright full moon, the field, and an empty post. What felt was like lightning inside of me. Waking me up, I rubbed my eyes and ran onto bed, hands against the cold window pane, fogging it with my hysterical deep breaths. It was gone. The fields were empty, completely empty except that lone post, like a cross with twine of rope hanging from its arms. I grabbed Nellie and ran out of the room, out of the hall, to the living room. Dad was asleep in his chair as static played on the TV. I shook his body and screamed, "Daddy, the scarecrow!" The scarecrow's gone. He jolted awake, eyes wide at my screams. My throat stung again with just how loud I was, and my eyes did too as I felt tears welling in them. He rocked forward in his chair, rubbing his eyes and his head. He was still barely awake as I kept tugging at his sleeve. "Katie, what?" "The scarecrow." I struggled to croak out my dry throat. "He's missing, he's awake." He took a deep breath as he lowered his head, running his hand through his hair. "Did you have a bad dream?" "Daddy?" He looked up at me, eyes big and soft and blue. He stared at me a moment, and he steadied my shaking body, placing both his hands on both my shoulders. I could see how exhausted he was, like he was every day, but he smiled, and he said, "Okay," groaning, standing up from his chair. I followed close behind, shivering, as he walked down the hall, out of the static TV light. His footsteps clacked on the wood, and he looked over his shoulder at me, calmly reminding me, "Keep her close, all right?" Nellie had to be the only thing holding me upright, along with Dad's words, his reassurance. I was waiting for the punchline, for him to remember that he took it down after I fell asleep, something like that. I felt just how cold the air really was in my lungs, on my lips, on my skin, under my flower pajamas. The door to my bedroom creaked open with just a nudge from my dad, and he reached in for the light switch, and he froze. The light didn't come on, and there was no flick of the switch. I stood by the side in the dark hall as my father towered over me, looking through the doorway. His eyes were wide and fixed on what he saw. His breath came out in shallow shudders. His hand came away slowly, almost imperceptibly, and returned to his side, shaking. Slowly I heard his breaths get deeper, heavier, and I could recognize the fear in them. The wide whites of his eyes were like moons all their own as he inched the steps out of the doorway. I couldn't help but move little by little away from him too, and whatever he saw. And then I heard it, a single, silent tap from inside of the bedroom, like a stick tapping a window, and then a long metallic scraping sound that reminded me of nails on a chalkboard. Suddenly, Dad snapped out of whatever trance he was in, his paralysis shifting to immediate action as he dashed to the side, scooping me up in his massive arms and sprinting with me down the end of the hallway. No sooner than that did I hear the distinct smash of breaking glass from inside my room and something heavy rolling in and crashing onto the floor. "Keep your eyes closed, Kit Kat." Dad yelled fast and loud into my ears as I bounced in his arms with every bounding step. "It's okay." An even louder, inhuman shriek sounded from inside the bedroom before I heard the door slam open. It sounded like screams, as much as it did winds and croaking like old wood. I squeezed my eyes shut as the dull glow of the TV came and went in less than a second. I clutched as much to my dad as I did to Nellie. I heard the panicked jangling of keys and felt the cold autumn air on the back of my neck and the jumping down of porch steps from with the gravel to tell me we were outside. I heard the unlock clicking and opening of the car door, and my dad deposited me into the front seat over the console. All the while, I heard him loudly whispering, "Okay, okay, okay." It's easy to realize now he was as much trying to calm himself down as he was me. And in the safety of the car, I thought now it was finally okay to open my eyes. I saw him, panicked, scared, in the open driver door, the overhead light from the truck shining down. He was halfway inside, just looking at me, taking 1 second to make sure I was okay. He said as much, "You're okay." I remember the look on his face, a moment of calm and respite. Looking at me, he had the look he always got before he was about to smile. I remember that, and I remember a long, curved glint of light that shimmered over his head for less than a second, for the rusty blade of a sickle erupted from his chest. I'll never forget his screams of pain as he leaned forward over the seat, his blood pouring down and off the tip of red-stained blade, and I could see it behind him, its rotting face, the straw falling from its long arms. It looked at me with its hollow eyes, and as my dad struggled to hold himself upright, it turned and pulled, pulling him with it, its movement stiff and awkward like a puppet on strings. The thing walked back toward the house, dragging my dad on the gravel behind it. I couldn't move from where I was no matter how much I wanted to do something, to do anything. I heard him groan as a sickle at the end of the long stick arm dragged him back. With one leg, it cleared the porch steps, but my dad used one hand to grab onto the railing, all of his last strength. The scarecrow struggled for a moment to get him up to move him, and with the last pull of sickle, I saw its head fall from its shoulders, smashing onto the deck. Then headless, it dragged my dad the rest of the way in, closing the door behind it. It felt like I was frozen in that car seat forever, but it was still hours before the sun came up. Hours I spent running, walking, crying down the only road out of that place. A girl in her pajamas, barefoot, walking for her life on a dirt road, clinging to her teddy bear. I wandered onto some access road some time before the sun started to rise, when a car slowed to a stop next to me. A man, a woman, 2 kids, and their dog. A family on a road trip. They asked a bunch of questions I was too tired, too scared, too weak to answer. They took to the nearest town, and I spent the next few nights in a police station where they asked me all the same questions. With time, I was able to answer some, and even asked a few. Police went to the farm, and came back saying they found nothing. No dad, no blood, no pumpkin. They asked me who my mom was, and what number they could call. Then it was a social worker telling me about somewhere new. 3 nights in a police station and 12 years in the foster system. My only next of kin were considered unfit, and that's never really changed. Neither have I, for that matter, except for the worse. Every August with the start of the school year, in a new town, in a new school, with a new family, I'd always freeze and scream and shout at the sight of any pumpkin, any scarecrow. I'd throw whatever I could at the TV when someone had on Wizard of Oz. I'd never go out on Halloween, and always be the shut-in freak to my so-called siblings. I'd be the problem child who'd never outgrown her teddy bear to my pretend parents, all 6 of them. I couldn't have been out of the house faster the day I turned 18, 2 days before the fall equinox this year, and about as long a drive from Dad's old farm. I found it, and I thought about going back myself for a long, long time. Find what they missed, what was right in front of their eyes. Find something, I don't know, or find nothing at all. I used to have my own room in the old apartment, but I'd always wake up in the middle of the night, scared of the sounds I'd hear, the shadows I'd see, even if it was nothing. I'd sneak out of my bedroom into Mom and Dad's to sleep between them and feel safe. But when Mom got worse, when I started to cough and complain of the smell in their room, one night I snuck down the hall to their bedroom door and opened it to see my dad, kneeling down on the other side, waiting for me. Fully awake, fully prepared for me. "Hey, Kit Kat." "Hi, Daddy." "Can't sleep?" "I'm scared. There's monsters in there." "Oh, yeah." His understanding always warmed me. "Is that why you come to sleep in Mommy and Daddy's bed? You and Mommy don't get scared. Monsters are scared of you. They don't come when I'm with you." Even in the low light, I remember seeing him nod, leaning forward. "You know, I have someone to keep you safe." I hadn't even noticed his hands were behind his back, so I looked down to see, or mostly feel, a soft, plush, stuffed teddy bear, half my size in his hands. "This is for you," he whispered. I gave her that special power, Mommy, and I have to keep the monsters away. You keep her close and take her to your room and you sleep. But what if the monsters come for you? I felt his hand in my hair before he pulled me into a hug, squishing my new bear between us. Don't you worry about us. What are you going to name her? What's Mommy's name? Nellie's never left my side, no matter what. I always took her with me to every house, every school, every field trip we weren't allowed to bring our dolls. I brought Nellie. The numbers of fights I got into with all those other girls in school, try to take her away from me. It's actually the reason I carry a knife now. It's surprisingly easy to not give a shit about others, even guardians, telling you you're too old for that kind of thing. When you've lived a life like mine, you grow to learn that what others call superstition, you call reason. That's especially true when you find yourself driving up the same gravel road you ran for your life down so many years ago. I have a truck now like he did, and I like driving like he did. I even think about my mom when I light a cigarette on the way up. Despite that, I hate stopping at gas stations, so I always keep sixpence tied down in the bed. Nellie rides passenger, belted like always. Before I know it, I'm face to face with that old, gray house I spent those sleepless nights in. The land, as desolate as it was when I left. No one's here. No one's lived here in years. No thanks to police. I park and step out, and zip Nellie up into a blue backpack. I sling over my shoulders. How ugly and abandoned and cold this place is. I walk up to the turnaround, the very spot he was killed, and dragged into the night, remembering a moment, exactly as it happened and where, with no trace left behind on the pure white ground. It's like looking at a ghost. I walk the same path he was dragged through, up the old creaky steps. I look on the deck at where the scarecrow's head fell off. Nothing. The door gives way with no effort at all, and the house is as empty as ever. But I feel the heaviness in the air, the sharp, cold sting that keeps me from taking one more step inside. Only one last thing. One last place I've yet to look. I'd imagine the moment I'd see it again over and over in my dreams. Wondered if it had found some other molding jack-o'-lantern to wear as a head. If I'd see my dad's dry blood on its sickle hand. I turn around the back of the house, and I see it. Sure enough, a thing on its post. Almost. You never forget something like that. The rotting smile and eyes bleeding with pumpkin guts. Its overalls and green shirt. But that isn't what I see, any of it. A red shirt and blue jeans, covered in dust, weathered and tattered with time. Straw seeps out of a gash in the center of his chest. The head is a cross-stitched sack of thatch with the eyes and mouth sewn shut. And little brown hat sits on his downturned head. The closer I get, the more I see just how tall he is. Stretched out on the post, crows pecking at his ears, and rubber nose fly away at my approach. I look up to see him facing down, one head length over me as I look. And the more I look, the more I feel what happened. More than remember, I still hear his screams. And mine, and that monster's. But it wasn't the same now. I look at his leathery face and the stitches across his mouth, as something in me forces me to stay, to look closer. Part of me knew, but I needed more. I reach into my pocket and flip open my knife. One arm grabs onto his soft shoulder, while the small blade wrenches into the scarecrow's mouth. Through the thatch, through the stitch string and straw, I cut. The crow's caw and the sky darkens. My grip tightens, and I cut more frantically, breathing heavier with every sawing motion I make. The dark inside the scarecrow's head starts to give way. A black widow spider crawls out from the corner of his mouth. I cut. I don't know what I'm thinking, but there has to be something I know there is. The low rumble of distant thunder, cut. More crows, cut. The creaking of the post, cut. With the last slice of my pocket knife across the straw. The scarecrow's mouth hangs open, and I see it. Teeth. 2 canines a bit sharper than usual, and 2 crooked front teeth, like they were fighting for each other's place. I knew. All along, I knew this. I feared this. Woke up in the night screaming of this. All those years, I never wanted to believe it. But now I see. Now I know. And that's enough. Today's the day. The equinox. Whatever's special about this day, whatever makes it happen, it'll happen again tonight. Or rather, it would have, as the storm from miles away slowly rolls in, I split 3 cans evenly between the house and field, and I watch it all burn. I remember that space heater my dad put in my room for me, and I think of him. The sun hasn't set yet, and I see the rising flames start to crawl and spread along the 4 corners of that post, engulfing what's on it. Then I finally put that place behind me, on the open road. I look in the rear view mirror to see the black clouds of smoke rise in the sky, as if begging for the coming rain. I'm shaking now, and I don't really know what to say. I guess this has all been for you, Daddy. You loved me, and you saved me, and I miss you. I miss you so much, and I pray to God that maybe I save you too. Story 5. Somebody keeps sending me gifts. The last one's still to come. It started with bar chocolate. You didn't eat it? Sarah asked when I told her about it. No. I opened the parcel because it had my name on it, but it clearly isn't actually meant for me. Sarah sighed. If Amazon haven't emailed you saying you need to return it, then I don't get what the big deal is. It's not L-dash. It isn't from Amazon. The address is handwritten. So I'm not eating it. It'd be weird. The phone went silent for a moment. Okay, that does sound weird. You don't recognize the handwriting. No. Secret admirer? Sarah suggested with a hint of mischief in her voice. I groaned. I don't want an admirer. I don't even want the chocolate. Not when it's been sent by some mysterious stranger. Send it to me. I'll take it. No, that should have been the end of it. But I wouldn't be writing this if it was. When I received the second delivery, I recognized the handwriting instantly. Inside, there was a voucher for 2 games of bowling. There was no note, whilst the chocolate had been flavored, that I enjoyed the bowling voucher was less personal, at least. I hadn't been bowling since I was a child, so if... Wait! For the first time I registered which alley this voucher was for. It offered me 2 free games at my local alley, which wasn't even part of a chain. Whoever had sent this to me either knew that I lived close to the bowling alley this voucher was from, or lived locally himself. Maybe even both. If this is a prank, I don't like it. I said when I called Sarah. I wouldn't. Sarah insisted. This is actually sort of creepy. Did you talk about chocolate and bowling at work maybe? No. Right. Nobody at work even knows my address anyway. We talk on social media sometimes, but they've never come to visit or anything. There was a pause, and I could hear tapping from the speaker of my phone. The gentle yet repetitive sound of Sarah poking her phone screen. Are you seriously scrolling on your phone whilst we're having this conversation? I didn't like the sound of my voice as it left me. A shrill, demanding cry. Still, I felt my concerns were serious enough that Sarah should be paying more attention than casually multitasking. It's not like that, she said quietly. I was seeing if I could find your address. But, you know my address? Yes, but if I didn't, I think I might still be able to work it out from some of your posts. You took a photo of the skyline and said it was from your window. You have a post you tag with support your local library. Things like that. I don't think I could work out how to find you from this, but only because I don't know what I'm doing. I read stories about people who tracked exes down from photos where there's a letterhead with their address on it they hadn't realized was there. And there are people online playing games where they can track a location from a photo of a park bench or whatever. This could be somebody from your work. I try to think of any of my co-workers who might like me or dislike me enough to do this. In fact, Sarah continued, it could be anyone at all. You still have a Facebook page, and your name's pretty unique. Is it even private? I don't know how to tell. It isn't. It will be. I'm sure it's nothing, she said. Sarah has never been a good liar, and the slight waver in her voice betrayed the fact that she was now almost as worried as I was. I ended the call and threw the voucher away. If I'd been unsure whether or not the gifts I'd been receiving were well-meaning or creepy, the next parcel more than made up for it. It was larger and heavier than anything that I'd received so far, and really I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The cardboard box held a small cool box inside, like you might use if you wanted to bring some pasta salad with you on a summer's hike. I pulled off the lid with increasing dread and found myself looking at long, sandy blonde hair. I wasn't scared at first. The gentle curls sat there waiting for a reaction, and I felt nothing at all. In a trance-like state, I lifted the hair out of the box as if getting a closer look would make all the pieces fall into place, and the hair came up as one connected mass. It was then that I noticed the pieces of scalp holding the hair together, and I screamed so loud and so long that my next-door neighbor forced the door open to reach me. "Are you hurt?" he asked in an authoritative yell. I couldn't answer and only succeeded in bringing my screams down to a gibbering, sobbing mess of chaos. I'd thrown the hair away from me when I'd noticed the skin attached to it, and I pointed at it. He picked it up just as I had and recoiled when he realized what he was holding. "What the shit?" he muttered. The police were called. I think that they were reasonably thorough, but I don't know what steps they're meant to take when someone gets a scalp delivered to their home. They took fingerprints and DNA from both me and the neighbor who'd stormed in to help me. He didn't look pleased with the interaction, but he complied. I was advised to stay somewhere else if possible and to get cameras. "I broke the lock on your door when I came in," my neighbor admitted. "Do you want me to install a new one?" I shook my head. I'd never had to attach a lock to a door before, and my neighbor had given me no reason to distrust him, but whoever was sending these parcels was dangerous, and right now anybody could be a suspect. "I'm sorry. I thought you were in trouble," he said. He did ask if I wanted to stay with me, but I'd feel no safer with this stranger whose name was either Mick or Mike, and occasionally played death metal loud enough that I could hear it through the walls and I would alone. He left and closed a useless door behind him. Staying where I was tonight seemed unwise. Ideally, I'd stay with a friend, but Sarah was my closest friend, and she lived a 2-hour flight from where I was. Even at that point, I didn't want to reach out to my parents. I didn't want to upset them, partly for their sake, but partly for my own. I'd been to years of therapy, but neither of them had really dealt with what had happened when I was younger, and instead developed an excessive fear that something truly terrible could befall on any one of us at any moment. They fed into each other's paranoia, and I was terrified that if I told them what was going on, then they'd suck me in, and I'd finally become so fragile and broken that I couldn't be fixed. I bought cameras and locks, and spent the evening making my home as safe as it could be. I didn't sleep that night, and kept a kitchen knife near to me at all times. The next parcel was small. I wasn't supposed to open it, and if it had arrived sooner, then I wouldn't have. But I've been trying to get the police to tell me anything about the investigation into the scalp I've received, and they weren't telling me anything. Some crazy part of me thought that this parcel could have a clue, and I'd be able to solve the mystery myself. There was nothing particularly disturbing in this box, but a child's toy. Specifically, it was a Polly Pocket set. Not the newer ones that I think are still made today, but a mermaid-themed set that was new when I was a kid. This wasn't the brilliant lead I'd hoped for, but it wasn't nothing either. An hour of internet searches told me that this set hadn't been in production for a long time, and barely anybody was selling this particular set online. Only one of the sellers wasn't overseas, and so I decided to start there, sending a long and emotional email explaining that if they recently sold a Polly Pocket Mermaid sleepover set, then I desperately needed details of who they sold it to. I attached photos of the scuff marks near the clasp and the chip paint on Polly's dress in the hope that it would verify that I was telling the truth. 2 days later, I'd received no word from the toy seller, but my dad called. Grandma had been in some sort of accident, and as she didn't live near to me and my parents, they were both traveling out to help look after her. I knew that my mystery stalker was behind that too somehow, but I couldn't prove it, so I said nothing. Finally, there was something close to good news. I received an email from the online toy seller telling me that she had sold the set in the pictures recently. I didn't recognize the name that she gave me, but she also gave me his email and his address. I had his actual address. A sane person would call the police, but they still hadn't said a damn thing about the scalp, and this bastard was fucking with my family. A quick Google told me that the address was only a 10-minute drive away, and I grabbed the kitchen knife that I'd taken to sleeping next to and headed to the place where my stalker apparently lived. Once I arrived at his door, I realized that I wasn't sure what to do next. I knocked and regretted it immediately. When nobody responded, I should have left, but I needed answers. An attempt to shoulder barge the door open resulted in nothing but a dull pain that radiated all the way down to my wrist, but there were rocks nearby in someone else's garden, and I threw one at the window. It didn't break straight away, but I threw another and then removed my jacket, and broke away enough of shards that I could climb inside. The house barely looked lived in. There was furniture but no photos, no ornaments, no TV. There was nothing beyond the bare essentials in various muted tones, until I reached the study, and there on a cheap pine desk lay a diary. I didn't remember writing a diary before today, but as soon as I saw the bright aqua notebook adorned with its many stickers, I knew it was mine from childhood. It was only a small book, and yet was still barely 2/3 full, so perhaps I'd forgotten about writing in it, because I hadn't kept a diary for very long. The only other thing on the desk was a red biro, and I flicked through the first few pages until I saw a phrase that had been underlined in red and then checked off with a large, passionate swoosh. It was an entry in which I'd mentioned wanting a bar of the chocolate that my stalker had ended up sending to me. A few pages later there was more red ink, this time marking my displeasure at being too ill to go to another kid's party at the bowling alley. I flicked through more pages and found a jealous whine about how I wanted hair just like Stacy's. The vague memory that I had of the child I'd written about it had the same colored hair that I had been sent with pieces of her stuck to it. The next entry that had been marked made no sense at first. A rant about how I wished that mean girl in my class would just shut up. It wasn't someone I had spoken to in school, and with a sense of dread, I wondered what had been done to her. I didn't even have any way to find out. My parents came under fire next with an entry saying that I wished that they'd just give me some space. And so he created a reason that they'd have to move away for a while. We were nearly at the end of my entries now, and I turned to the last page. The script here was different. It was still my handwriting, but it was rougher and almost stabbed into the page. I remembered why I'd stopped keeping a diary. A noise outside startled me back into the present, and I left the house from the same window I entered. I've no doubt that someone saw me as I drove away, but it's the least of my issues now. I'm writing this from a cafe. Too scared to go back home, but too stupid to think of any other plan. Because it turns out that the day that I wrote the final entry in my diary was the day that James died. The last sentence I wrote says, "All I want is my brother back." And it's been checked off with one final red swoosh. Story 6. My carnival crime condemned me to rhyme. Perhaps it seems I'm faking it, for such a tiny crime. That carnival has altered me, and I can only rhyme. I wish I never went that day, that I just stayed home. But now that my fate has been sealed, I write with this new tone. The carnival was in my town. I thought it might be fun, some interesting performances, and junk food by the ton. I sat within the tent that day and watched it all take place. I got my $20 worth, but didn't leave with haste. When all was done, the crowd filed out. Their laughter filled the air. The ringmaster took off his hat and gave a practiced stare. He thanked the folks for coming by, then vanished through the veil. The tent seemed smaller once he'd gone and dimmer, sickly pale. I lingered where the curtain split to glimpse behind the show. Just canvas, ropes, and shadow forms that swayed so soft and low. A voice behind me whispered, "Sir, the exit's to your right." I nodded, but my feet betrayed and led me to the night, beyond the tents. The air was still, the rides no longer spun. A fog crept in across the grass and hid the setting sun. The game stands leaned like crooked teeth, their prizes torn and gray. A puppet show still whispered lines, though no one watched its play. The puppets twitched on tangled strings, their painted mouths ajar. They bowed before a shadowed form that waited by the bar. I thought it was a person there, a worker left behind. But when it turned, I swear I saw no eyes of humankind. The blackened form rose up like smoke, its visage dark as night. Only piercing through the void 2 eyes, and smile bright. Those eyes, they pierced into my soul and made my heart despair. All I wanted from that point was to be far from there. It spoke, or maybe somewhat sang, a humming low and deep. The words slid round my reason's edge and burrowed in like sleep. It said my name in broken tones, then laughed as if in jest. And from the dark, the ringmaster stepped forth in crimson vest. "You've seen the part of our show, the one not meant for men. You took a step past curtain's edge, and won't step back again." Before I turned, the strings were thrown, The dolls began to climb. Their grinning faces whispered soft and wrapped me up in twine. They dragged me to a farther tent and fixed me to a cart. It sat upon a set of rails from whence I would depart. I yelled and screamed, "Please let me go," but my cries they would not heed. The ringmaster stepped into view and gave his practiced screed. "You've seen something that you should not. We can't just let you go, but how severe your consequence is just for you to know. You'll play a game, maybe 2 or more. Your success in each determines what's in store. So step right up, the first draw is nigh. It's time to see where your future lies." The cart took off into the dark. It screeched and slowed as it came to park. The spotlight shone on my makeshift train, revealing my task, my first skill game. On top of that, to make things worse, a crowd of beings appeared, observing my curse. Before me lay in tight array, dozens of heads floating in jars, each awake in greenish brine, looking at me from afar. Their eyes, though distorted by rounded glass, showed pity I could sense, as if I got this wrong, I might soon be Theseus. "You've got 3 balls to toss ahead. Get one of them in a jar. It's your life you'll be wagering if you don't make the pars." Trembling hand, I took the first and said a silent prayer. I raised my arm and gave a toss. The ball flew through the air. It landed on a jar's thick rim and bounced off through the dark. 2 more tries to save my life. I had to meet my mark. The faces in the jars all turned. Their mouths began to hum. A hollow choir of bubbling sound that made my fingers numb. I cast a throw with shaking hand. It veered, then curved askew. It struck a lid, rolled down the side, and vanished from my view. The ringmaster spread out his arms and said, "One chance. Here it comes." The final ball fell heavier, as though it knew my crime. I whispered once, "Lord, let it fall," and threw for one last time. It arced across the stagnant air and hung there for a beat, then dropped into a waiting jar. The crowd leapt to its feet. A cheer rang out, half joy, half pain, that echoed through the gloom. The heads all blinked, then slowly sank, each vanishing in its tomb. The ringmaster removed his hat and bowed with practiced pride. "Well done," he said. "You live for now, but there are more who've tried." He snapped his cane. The cart lurched forth and vanished down the track. The laughter followed through the dark and dared me not look back. "You've won your life. You must be glad, but now we have to see if you will be leaving here with your sanity." The next game came into my view, my countenance, it fell, as I beheld that classic game with the hammer and the bell. If you like your mind, you'll listen now, for this I won't repeat. For every inch you fall below, your sanity retreats. So strike with heart and don't fall short. You'll only have one shot. So take the mallet in your hands and slam it on that spot. I took the mallet, picked it up, and felt a sudden shock, as if the tool within my hands was silently taking stock. My mind felt fuzzy. I reined it in and swung with all my might, and kept my focus razor sharp on that ascending light. The bell I missed by just an inch, but felt I did quite well. But vaguely I received a change. My cognizance it fell, but only by a small amount. I really can't complain. So with a sigh, I felt me move on to my final game. You've done quite well, I'll tell you. The worst is yet behind. But given your grave trespass, a consequence you'll find. You're still alive, your mind is sound, so you might hope to tell our secret to the watching world and put us all through hell. So, something we must do to you, and you'll determine which. Just spin the wheel that's up ahead. We'll end without a hitch. The wooden wheel before me, painted and lit up, each slot contained a curse for me, a drink that I must sup. I surveyed the possibilities and shuddered with affright. Would I lose my tongue, my ears, or possibly my sight? The choices seemed off-putting, but nothing could be done. I placed my hand upon the wheel and pulled it till it spun. My readers know what happened next, what my lot would be, but compared with the choices on the wheel, this one relieved me. You survived the trial with little but a scratch, but no one will believe you when you talk like that. So find yourself lucky that all you do is rhyme. But one more thing, you work here now. Your first shift starts at 9 inch. So if you find a carnival, avoid it at all costs. For those who see the final act can never count the lost. Story 7. I'll never go back to the county fair again. Corn dogs and cow shit scented the air as I sauntered into a barn at the annual county fair on a mission of liberation. Bovines stared in dismay, huddled uncomfortably in cages too cramped to call humane. 3 4-H kids ran in front of me wearing masks depicting the faces of smiling cows. The hypocrisy was lost on my fellow townsfolk. I walked out the back entrance of the stable to find myself staring face to face with a monstrous man inhaling the overcooked slab of meat from a steak on a stick. That was a rather common sight at the county fair. But for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off him as drool dribbled down what may have once been a chin and splattered onto his undersides. I support my local law enforcement tank top. Lifeless green eyes stared unblinking into mine, and I got the unsettling sense that he was judging me. I forced myself to avert my gaze and moved on. 2 county sheriffs stood under a tent laughing loudly. The taller one with the bald head pretended to grab the gun from his holster and pointed his fingers at his shorter, chubbier companion who fell to his knees and stammered, "Please, officer, don't shoot me. The dope ain't mine." The 2 pigs cackled into the dimming evening sky. The chicken barn was in front of me at that point, and I casually strode inside and absorbed my surroundings. Hundreds of cages were stacked on top of one another, each a foot tall and a foot wide, just large enough to squeeze 1 chicken inside. The cages made a maze for people to walk through and gawk as the tortured hens squawked. I stopped to look at 1 chicken in particular, her feathers forced out of the tiny spaces between the bars holding her captive. I wanted to free her, but I was on another assignment. So I hung my head in shame and stalked out of the chicken coop and into the open. Cold, dead green eyes met mine upon exiting. Could that be the same man with the steak on a stick from earlier? It was, but this time it wasn't overcooked steak he was eating. He was playing Edward 40 hands with 2 20-piece buckets of fried chicken. A half-eaten wing bone dropped in his mouth and fell to the grass. But wait, that couldn't have been him. The other guy was wearing a tank top, and this dude was sporting a t-shirt with the words God, guns, guts, and gravy written on it in some grotesque font. His jaw hung open, and a bit of spittle dribbled off his lip. It was the same guy all right. His gaze stayed on mine, and I could have sworn there was a hint of malice in those beady eyes. It was like he was staring into my soul. I shook from whatever fever dream the man had kept placing me under and carried on. I had a job to complete after all, but I couldn't shake the feeling he was following me. Could he have known why I was there? I was almost at the pig portion in the livestock section of the fairgrounds when I noticed the 2 sheriffs from before beating the life out of some guy at the skee ball stand. His hands were cupped behind his back, and he was lying on his stomach, a pool of crimson puddling around his head in the dirt. "Goddamn fucking junkie," the tall cop with the bald head said as he kicked the man in the side. "It was just a joint," the man on the ground pleaded through exasperated breaths. "That shit's illegal, you goddamn fucking scumbag," the short, chubby cop yelled, and then proceeded to spit on the man. "All these nice people are here trying to relax and eat some goddamn steak on a stick. And here you are polluting the air with your goddamn fucking drugs." For a moment, I considered informing the 2 cops about the real causes of air pollution, but I hearkened to thoughts weighing in my mind of the possible consequences of such a bold action and turned away. My real responsibility that night was ahead, and the time on my watch told me it was 5 minutes until the fair closed. I needed to find a place to hide. The 30-foot-tall fun slide was in my sights, so I bolted in its direction and dove under the lowest part to lie in the cold grass and wait. I sat in silence for half an hour, then peeled myself off the dewy grass and snuck toward the pig barn. Snorts and snores surrounded me as I sauntered forth into a harrowing hellhole of hopeless hogs. A few of them grunted at me as I passed them by and stared into their piteously pathetic pupils. A sudden squeal to my right revealed a little piglet gasping for breath as the weight of her mother crushed her little frame. The mom spasmed and squirmed in a fruitless attempt to roll off her child, but the confines of the crate encapsulating her wouldn't allow such sovereignties. I pressed forward knowing I couldn't possibly save every animal. Then a familiar snort sniggered in my direction. I turned to my left and saw him. Abner. I shouted, running to his cage. I'm so sorry this happened. I swear, once I find out who kidnapped you, Our reunion was interrupted by a piercingly piggish snort, and I glanced around a dimly lit barn. A sizable silhouette stood in the distance. It was a man, a large man with deep, uncomfortable wheezes exhaling from his gaping maw. Stay back. I've got a knife and I'm not afraid to use it. I lied desperately. He maundered at me. One gargantuan foot hit the ground and his body swayed to the left. The other foot found the floor and his weight sent in the opposite way. Hilarious as it was horrifying. His massive, menacing frame moved into the moonlight, shining through a window in the barn. I squinted to make sure it was real. It couldn't be. It was that same fucking man from earlier. Only this time he'd had on yet another shirt, a massive sweater hugging his torso, just a bit too tightly read. I love pigs, except the word love was replaced with a slice of bacon, and he wasn't eating 2 buckets of fried chicken. He was deep-throating a foot-long corn dog. After swallowing the entire thing in one fell swoop, he spit out what was left of the stick onto the hay-covered barn floor and leaned to his left, letting out a fart that sounded as if it may have required a change of draws. "Fuck are you doing in here?" His voice boomed as a light drizzle began to fall outside the barn behind him. My mind raced as I struggled to find the right words to say to save myself and Abner from the flesh-devouring devil. "This is private property," the man said, his eyes penetrating mine as he licked what looked to be mustard off his stubby fingers one at a time. "Please," I said, "someone stole my pet. I'm just here to free my friend." "Pigs ain't pets." The man laughed as he removed his pinky from his mouth and placed it in his nose. "Pigs is for eating. That's just a human construct, and a barbaric one at that," I said as a cold sweat crept down my spine, and Abner whimpered beside me. "We don't have to eat pigs, or any animal for that matter. He sure does look tasty," the man said as slobber slipped down his chin, and he began lumbering in my direction. "Besides, humans need meat. How else are we supposed to get our protein?" "Are you kidding me? There's protein in so many things. Oats, nuts, beans," I shouted as I attempted to open the gate, holding Abner in his cage. But the door wouldn't budge. "Have you never eaten a goddamn bean?" I screamed. "Maybe I'll eat you after I'm done with that pig." The mammoth of a man chuckled as he barreled closer. "You ain't much bigger than a bean yourself. Please, just leave us alone," I cried. Then suddenly, when the goddamn fuck is all this goddamn fucking noise go on in here? A familiar voice echoed into the barn. More goddamn fucking junkies is my guess. 2 sheriffs treaded toward us with 2 shiny Glock 9s glistening in their grips. "Officers!" The meat-eating menace began as he spun around to face them. "This boy is an intruder. He's trying to steal all the BAC." 5 or 6 gunshots rang throughout the barn before he could finish, and my artery-clawed assailant fell back onto Abner's wooden cage, splitting the structure in 2. Abner squealed under his weight, then squeezed himself free, and we slunk the back entrance unnoticed amid the erupting and chaotic snorts and screeches of the pigs around us. We snuck out into the night and crept along the outside of the barn. I put my head to the wall and peered into a window. "Would you look at that?" The tall sheriff laughed and kicked the lifeless body in front of him. His shirt says, "I love bacon." "Fuck, bacon sounds good right now," the short, chubby one said, put his hands on his stomach. "Let's go to the Waffle House and get some." "What do we do about this guy?" "Let's just wait till the morning. Then when the town breaks out in mass hysteria over a dead body, we'll just blame it on another goddamn junkie." "You bet your goddamn ass we do. Now let's get out of here. I hate goddamn fucking pigs." Story 8. The Old Lady in the Woods. This happened years ago, but I still remember it vividly, every single detail burned into my memory because of how terrifying it was. I grew up in a rural area in the Philippines. Back then, when I was around 12, my friends and I were obsessed with collecting spiders. We'd make them fight, kind of like Pokemon battles. It was stupid, but it was what we did for fun. The thing is, the best spiders only came out at night. It was a Saturday, around 7 p.m. I was eating dinner when someone knocked on the door. It was my two friends, Yuri and Eric. They were waiting for me so we could head out spider hunting. We went to secluded spots surrounded by tall grass, trees, and thick bushes, a perfect place to find spiders. Around 9:30 p.m., we were deep in the forest. The kind of deep where you can't even see the glow of the village lights anymore. That's when the air changed. The playful energy we had suddenly vanished, replaced by this heavy, uneasy feeling. Eric was the first to say it. "Let's go home," he whispered. But Yuri and I didn't want to leave yet. We hadn't caught enough spiders, so we pushed further in. I tried to lighten the mood by talking and playing music on my phone. It helped, at least for a while. By midnight, we'd finally caught enough. My phone battery was down to 3%, so I told them it was time to head back. They agreed. I turned off the music. And that's when I noticed something was wrong. Everything was silent, not quiet, dead silent. No crickets, no wind, no rustling leaves, just our footsteps and our breathing. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. We started retracing our steps, walking faster than before. Then we heard it, laughing. A woman's laugh, soft, raspy, and distant, but close enough to send chills crawling down my spine. We spun around, flashing our lights toward the sound. That's when we saw her, an old woman, standing about 30 feet behind us, smiling. Not the kind of smile you give someone you recognize. It was wide, too wide. Her face looked pale and wrong, and she didn't have a flashlight, just standing there in complete darkness, staring at us. Eric muttered something I couldn't make out. Yuri was trembling. I tried to sound brave. "Bro, don't be scared. Maybe she's just out here doing something." But even as I said it, my stomach dropped. What could an old lady possibly be doing alone in the middle of the forest at midnight? I told them to keep walking. Every few steps, I glanced back and flashed my light behind us. The old lady hadn't moved at first. Then, slowly, she began walking one step at a time, still smiling. We picked up the pace. And then we heard it. Snap, branches breaking. From both sides. It sounded like someone running toward us. That was it. We bolted. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Just pure fear. We ran through the forest as fast as we could, branches whipping our arms, our legs burning, tears in our eyes. None of us looked back. Not once. After what felt like forever, we finally saw the lights of the village. We collapsed on the ground, shaking and gasping for air. Aside from a few bruises and scratches, we were fine, physically at least. But something changed that night. After that, I never went spider hunting again. Even now, 6 years later, I can still picture her face, the way her mouth stretched into that impossible grin, her eyes glinting in the dark. I never went back to that part of the forest, and I never will. Story 9. I was struck by lightning. Now I see what hides above us. Many who chance upon these words will doubt them. Some will dismiss my account as a delirium of an unsound mind. Others may even find amusement in my confessions, and them I offer no protest. My purpose is not to persuade the skeptical, nor to beg belief from the indifferent. I write in the frail hope that someone, some solitary soul acquainted with the darker strait of existence, might discern in my testimony a pattern familiar, and perhaps offer aid, though I fear such aid no longer lies within mortal reach. Before all else, I must refute the easy accusation of madness. I know what madness is. I have glimpsed it from so near that I can feel its breath upon my thoughts, yet I have not yielded to it. My mind remains my own, shaken, yes, but unbroken. And because I would prove this to myself as much as to any reader, I must retrace the spectral path that led me here. Step by step, back to the day that tore the veil from the hidden world. That day, meant to mark the birth of my new life, became instead the genesis of my ruin. It was then the floodgates opened, and all that should have remained unseen poured through. From that hour onward, I have lived in the shadow of abominations too vast, too obscene, to have ever been conceived by human thought. 2 weeks ago it began, the day that was meant to be one of rebirth for my wife and I, the day of our marriage. Though the union was, in its essence, a legal bond, the significance of that fact did little to diminish the extraordinary weight of the day. It was the day we would begin living together without restraint, a day that permitted me to acquire a titre de séjour and remain in France with her. For over 6 months, we had labored in the shadow of bureaucracy, traveling back and forth in pursuit of the necessary papers. And so, on the day itself, we intended not merely to proceed, but to savor it, to stretch every moment into eternity. The sun rose, spilling its harsh, golden light upon the world, as though marking our union with cosmic approval. My wife had labored over our wedding cake, while I had toiled over the meal the previous day. On that morning, all that remained was the final touches of cake, a task she undertook with hands that trembled like fragile wings. I, meanwhile, was paralyzed in a curious fog of distraction. The monumental reality of the day, the marriage itself, had yet to penetrate the cocoon of stress and fear that enveloped me. My wife, on the other hand, was transparently anxious. Each breath shook her chest. Her fingers wavered as she traced words upon the cake, and tiny beads of sweat formed against her skin despite the cool, 10-degree autumn air. Her beauty, radiant and undeniable, did nothing to disguise the trembling core of her being. For a fleeting instant, I felt a pang of secondary anxiety, an echo of her fear, but it passed. My mind, always a sanctuary of duty, reclaimed itself, and I bent once more to the obligations of the day, as though my careful hands could shape not only the cake, but reality itself. We had agreed to reveal our attire only at the appointed moment. I prepared myself in the solitude of her uncle's home, while she dressed under her mother's watchful eye. Rarely had I worn a suit, and the strange elegance of the garment pressed against me with unfamiliar weight. Yet I dressed myself with meticulous care, arranging my tie beneath the collar, smoothing every wrinkle, placing the pin with its black gem and the sky blue flower upon my jacket as if performing a ritual. For a brief, intoxicating moment, I believed the suit had transformed me, and with it, the day itself became palpable, almost real. At the town hall, the official papers awaited our signatures. My eyes first fell upon her, and in that instant, the world narrowed to the singular gravity of her presence. I felt my love for her rekindle with the sudden, inexorable force of an unseen tide, and in her gaze, wide with awe, I recognized the same renewed devotion mirrored back at me, a fragile, luminous connection amid the ordinary machinery of civil procedure. Yet beneath that luminous clarity, I sensed the faintest tremor of something beyond comprehension, a shadow that lingered at the periphery of perception, whispering that what was begun today might not remain safely within the bounds of human understanding. She wore a long white dress that seemed woven of winter's own breath. The fabric did not conceal her form, but rather revealed it in dignified grace, pronouncing her shape without transgression. A single slit at the knee allowed her movement, while upon her shoulders rested a coat of immaculate fur, white as the snows of some forgotten Arctic shore. The purity of her attire made her pallor seem almost spectral, and the faint flush upon her lips and cheeks gave the impression of warmth precariously clinging to something too divine, too fragile to be mortal. The marriage itself passed with bewildering brevity. 6 months of turmoil, of ceaseless labor and anxious hope, condensed into scarcely 20 minutes of signatures and ceremony. Then we were free to laugh, to take photographs, to imagine our lives beginning anew. It was the happiest day of my life. It was also, though I knew it not then, the last day of my former existence. That evening, we celebrated long after the sun had fled. We opened gifts, shared wine, and lingered in a joy that seemed infinite. When at last the hour grew strange and sleepless, we decided to walk together, a simple stroll through the forest not far from the house, to be alone amid the damp whisper of autumn. The moon guided us, bathing the path in its argent glow. Her dress caught the light and shimmered with a brilliance almost painful to behold. We walked hand in hand, silent more often than not, our glances speaking what words could not. Even now, after all has followed, my love for her remains the one pure ember in the ashes of my being. The night was ours, but the weather had other intentions. Without warning, the wind grew sharp, and the heavens began to murmur. We laughed at the rain's intrusion, foolishly believing ourselves invincible to such mortal inconveniences. We even kissed beneath the downpour, like actors in scene too sentimental for life, yet too perfect to resist. How naive we were to believe the storm a simple thing of nature. I would trade every memory of that kiss to undo what followed. Hindsight brands every joy with mockery for the horrors that have since revealed themselves, born of that single, thoughtless indulgence beneath the storm. No earthly delight could ever compensate. She laughed then, and her laughter, bright and innocent, echoed against the trees. I remember encircling her waist, her brief resistance, the playful twist that broke my hold. She darted back, eyes alive with mischief, her skirt lifted in her hand. Droplets ran from her hair to her cheek, tracing her smile before falling to the earth. For an instant, time itself seemed suspended, a tableau of joy framed by the murmuring dark. Then, with one step forward, the world erupted in light. The heavens split open. She vanished in the brilliance, devoured by radiance, and I was cast into an abyss so profound that light itself became an alien memory. When I first awakened, I was greeted once more by that blinding light, though this time it did not vanish, but waned gradually, as though the heavens themselves grew weary of their brilliance. My wife's face swam into view above me, her beauty disfigured by anguish. The paint upon her cheeks bore the faint, glistening traces of tears long shed, and when she spoke, her voice trembled with a grief that seemed older than her years. I recall the warmth of her tears, soaking the gown that shrouded me. A physician soon arrived, a grave man who, with rehearsed solemnity, informed me that I had been struck by lightning. He spoke of burns and miracles, of luck both cruel and divine. The luckiest and unluckiest man I've ever seen, he said. Ah! If only he knew how pitifully shallow his words were beside the abyss that awaited me. My first encounter with the unhallowed occurred in that same room, beneath the sterile hum of hospital lights. Visiting hours had ended, and my beloved had departed, promising her return with the dawn. I lay half turned toward the wall, my mind wandering through dim corridors of thought. The white paint before me dissolved, and in its place I saw only the web of my own delirium, some vast, trembling pattern woven by an unseen arachnid poised upon the brink of madness. When I returned from that reverie and let my eyes fall upon the doorway, something shifted in the air. The unseen spider slipped or was thrust from its fragile perch, and in that instant my mind ceased all weaving. I beheld it. Even now, the memory sickens me. To call a monster is to make mockery of the word. No language, however old, can render the blasphemy of that form. It entered the doorway as an adult might stoop to enter a child's playhouse, vast and misshapen, its hide convulsing with unwholesome motion. The color of its flesh was that of some hue denied to mankind. Filthy, ancient, and yet unlike any corruption of the earth. It crawled, lurched, and slithered in turns, its countless limbs serving neither grace nor purpose. Even the texture of its surface seemed to violate the laws of matter. It drifted about the room, stooping, groping, lingering near me. I held my breath within my chest, willing myself into silence, praying that my very existence might elude its notice. Its eyes, those crooked, luminous deformities, passed over me again and again, yet seemed to see something beyond me, something dreadful and unseen. At last it withdrew, squeezing once more through the door like vapor through a narrow crack. And then, oh merciful heavens! As it passed into the hall, the doctor entered. She moved through the monstrosity as though through air, her figure intersecting its impossible frame, unknowing, untouched. She smiled upon me, but the sight of her face against that lingering silhouette froze my veins. I said nothing of what I had seen. My horror she mistook for pain, and though her compassion was genuine, my tongue lay bound by a paralysis that words could never have broken. For even had I spoken, what syllables could convey that which blasphemes against all mortal comprehension? So I smiled faintly and whispered that all was well, though my mind had already glimpsed a world in which nothing ever could be. After the doctor's departure and the soft echo of her footsteps faded down the corridor, I was left alone once more. My thoughts, unguarded, returned to that unnameable visitation. For an hour, my mind labored beneath its image, as if the very air around me still retained the outline of its shape. I contemplated that obscene silhouette until its memory began to blur, not by choice, but by the merciful will of a mind seeking refuge from its own awareness. There are terrors so vast that the brain, in sheer defense, folds them into darkness. So I buried it deep, named it delusion, and convinced myself that sanity had never left me. I only wish it stayed buried. Not long after I had lulled myself with this fragile reasoning, my wife arrived to take me home. I recall her joy, the tremulous relief that softened her face as she saw me upright and breathing. She embraced me tightly, her scent warm and familiar, dispelled for a moment all the phantoms of my thoughts. She believed, poor soul, that all was well again. And I, too, intoxicated by her hope, began to believe that life might continue unbroken. How pitiful that memory feels now, like watching sunlight upon the deck of a sinking ship. We left the hospital hand in hand, our steps echoing faintly along the sterile tiles. Conversation came easily until we passed through the waiting room. There, my words died in my throat. The world before me shifted. The chairs, the patients, the nurse's station, all melted into a scene so profane that the mind could scarcely reconcile the two realities. The waiting room had become a dim and pulsing chamber, its walls breathing, glistening with moisture that seemed to exhale despair. A colony of monstrous flies, swollen and fused, writhed in a corner like an infected wound of creation. Something vast and unseen pressed along the ceiling, producing a slow, wet popping sound that seemed to crawl behind my eyes. And near the doorway, God, near the doorway, lingered the same abomination I had seen in my room, its crooked eyes sweeping the floor as though searching for forgotten. My wife's voice reached me through a fog, gentle yet distant. I could not respond. I remember her grasp tightening on my arm, her words growing urgent, but I could only stare, frozen between the real and the impossible. When at last we stepped outside, the world did not cleanse itself of that corruption. They were everywhere, scattered like debris of some unseen catastrophe, phasing through people, drifting through walls, sliding between trees and lamplight. On the car ride home, the road unrolled like a black river beneath the wheels, and I tried to tell myself it was madness, that my mind had not survived the lightning unscathed. Yet even as I thought this, a rhythmic drumming began in my skull. It was not pain alone, but a cadence, a deliberate, alien pulse, resonating from some dimension adjacent to thought itself. With each beat, my vision trembled, and I felt as though something beyond the veil was calling, not to my ears, but to my very nerves. I closed my eyes, hoping the darkness would bring silence. It did not. The rhythm only grew stronger, as if an answer. I spent the first few days at home in an uneasy calm. I was fortunate not to glimpse any of them within or about my dwelling. Yet their absence was no comfort. Absence, after all, may simply be disguise. The very stillness of the air seemed charged with a waiting presence, as though the walls themselves were aware of what they kept out. That nagging would have grew within me like a fever. Even now, as I write this, I have not seen them here, but I feel the time coming when that will change, and you shall soon understand why. My wife, with a patience born of love, observed my quiet terror through the first day. She believed I would unburden myself in time, as I always had. Yet this fear was beyond speech, for words could not confine what I had seen. When at last she broached the subject, I broke before her and wept like a condemned man. I spoke of the vision, not as clearly as I wished, but enough for her to peer into the fog of my madness. She held me, trembling yet unafraid. She did not mock or doubt. Instead, she reasoned gently, like one comforting a child after a nightmare. Her calm lent me a fragile courage, and her belief that I might endure these visions kept me tethered to life. The creatures, I told her, had never touched me. They passed through matter, oblivious to my presence. Perhaps they could not perceive us, or perhaps they simply did not care. The latter thought chilled me more deeply than any malice could. In the days that followed, I began to reclaim some semblance of existence. I started by watching from my window. The town below seemed unchanged, yet among its streets and rooftops crawled those impossible forms. Each a separate heresy of creation, twisted, swollen, pitiably malformed. Limbs sprouted where logic forbade them. Faces collapsed into folds of indistinguishable flesh. Eyes stared in senseless directions. A mockery of life, obscene in its purposelessness. Had I been their creator, I too would have hidden them from the light. When I finally resolved to leave the house, the act felt like blasphemy. I remember the weight of air against my body, thick and viscous, as though I moved through an invisible mire. Every step was an offense against some unseen decree. Yet I went to a small market not far from home to purchase something trivial, a drink, a proof of ordinary life. The street seemed dreamlike, each sound distant and delayed. None of the beings acknowledged me. They wandered in their vacant procession, unheeding, as if engaged in some higher errand of entropy. And then the light above me dimmed. A vast shadow rolled across the pavement. I looked up and beheld it. It was like a whale, yet not a whale. A monstrous chimera of whale, jellyfish, and ray. Its translucent organs draped like ribbons of rotting silk. It drifted through the heavens with the silence of an ancient god, trailing black ichor that sizzled as it fell through the air. Its presence polluted the very blue of the sky. It was magnificent and loathsome, a cathedral of decay adrift in the firmament. My air was short, mercifully short. I returned with trembling hands, yet unscathed. The monsters, in their dreadful disinterest, had let me be. My wife rejoiced at my success. Her joy filled the house with warmth I had almost forgotten, and for a moment I believed that perhaps I could live with this madness, so long as it did not draw nearer. Oh, how foolish such hope seemed now. She urged me, days later, to visit the library, my old refuge. She thought that in returning to my former habits, I might return to myself. And so I agreed. I spent that night preparing, convincing my heart that knowledge could protect me. Yet deep within, another part of me stirred, the part that felt that rhythmic drumming within the skull, whispering that what I sought in books had already begun to seek me. The distance between the library and my home was roughly twice that my first outing to the mini-mart, a small measure by reason, yet in terror, it felt like traversing worlds. It was in every sense a step twice as vast, twice as perilous, and twice as fatal as my first. I departed with my mind primed for revelation, for sights that had no right to exist within the Creator's imagination. And as I walked, it dawned upon me that such creatures were never meant to be found. Perhaps they had been sealed away in some hidden stratum of reality, a vault for rejected life. The lightning, I thought, had torn open some long dormant pathway within my mind, awakening a sense forbidden to mankind. Through this flaw in perception, I now peered into that blighted dimension and bore witness to what the universe had tried to forget. The walk passed without harm, though not without horror. Each step forward brought me closer to comprehension, and comprehension, I learned, is its own damnation. My mind began to grasp the obscene logic of these things, to analyze their form and habit. Yet this curiosity, this irreverent gaze, which set in motion the chain of events that condemned me to this room, this trembling hand, these bloodshot eyes. Even now, as I write, I feel the chill of that moment in my marrow. It began as I returned home. The streets teemed with unholy anatomies, the malformed, the swollen, the unfinished, towering Nephilim-like figures pressed between buildings, their flesh branching into impossible architectures. Around them crept chimeras, creatures assembled from the refuse of other living things. Their bodies bore eyes upon eyes, 1,000 shifting pupils that gazed in no common direction, each a fragment of an uncoordinated mind. I had almost reached my door when I was noticed. Fool that I was, I lingered to study them, to test whether they truly saw me. I should have looked away. I should have bowed my head and gone inside. But I did not. I stood and stared. And then it happened. Across the street, one of them stirred. It was smaller than the others, yet no less obscene. Its skull encircled by eyes of differing size and hue, a crown of sight. For a moment, it faced the heavens, reflective and unmoving. Then, with a sickening precision, every one of its eyes turned toward me, all of them AT-1s. The sensation was not fear as humans know it. It was a total violation of being, as though a vast, cold intelligence had pressed itself against my soul. My spine arched, my limbs convulsed. There was no scream, for language itself deserted me. I fled, key already in hand, stumbling into the doorway with the desperate grace of prey escaping a god. That moment replays endlessly in my mind. I see those eyes whenever I close mine, shining through the dark like dying suns. Until then, they had ignored me, content to wander their secret purgatory unseen. But my gaze, my hunger to understand, had broken that sacred veil. My wife and I spoke little that night. She wept beside me as I told her what had happened, and together we reached the only conclusion that could be reached. It was my scrutiny, my need to know, that had invited their attention, and ever since, the air around our home feels inhabited. There are times late at night when I feel their eyes upon the windows, searching, patient, persistent, and horribly familiar. I have never been one cut from a weak fabric, and though I had faced horrors that mocked creation itself, I still clung to conviction that living was possible. Yet now I understood they were not blind to us. They had always known of our existence. What they ignored was our ignorance. They never seemed capable of interacting with matter. They glided through walls, climbed buildings, and passed through each other as though the laws of nature rejected them. This illusion of distance granted me a hollow courage. If they could not touch, they could not harm. To survive, I would simply have to ignore them entirely, walk as though they were nothing, and never again allow my eyes to wander their way. So I planned another excursion, this time to the mini-mart once more. I was not yet ready for a longer journey. It felt absurd, almost comedic, to risk my soul for a bottle of soda. Still I went, my gaze fixed to the pavement, seeing only the motion of my own feet. The peripheries of vision churned with motion, impossible silhouettes convulsing in silence. I walked with trembling, disjointed gait, each step a defiance, the instinct that begged me to flee. The cold autumn air pressed upon me like a weight of iron. Thoughts became my only refuge. I forced my mind to stay on trivialities, anything but the obscene pageant writhing just beyond sight. Something vast swung to my left. Something vicious bubbled to my right. I did not look. The mini-mart, blessedly, was vacant of those apparitions. Inside, the fluorescent light felt almost sacred in its normalcy. I exhaled and raised my eyes. The saleswoman regarded me with that dull disinterest particular to living, and for a moment, I believed myself safe again. I purchased my drink and stepped outside. I must have forgotten. Perhaps I wanted to feel human again, to see the world rather than the ground. Whatever the reason, I lifted my gaze and froze. Across the street, the crowned one stood waiting. The same entity. The same impossible crown of eyes. They fixed upon me. Every single one. A sensation flooded me that the word dread cannot contain. My nerves became strings of fire. My bones fell hollow. I knew, somehow, that it recognized me, that my terror existed vividly within its mind. I forced my gaze down and began my return. I focused on movement, on rhythm. Left, right, blue. Something was wrong. The world had stopped. No motion, no sound. The air was congealed. Even with my eyes on the ground, I felt them, all of them. Their gazes pressed against me like heat from an unseen furnace. I whispered to myself, almost home. Just keep walking. They can't touch you. They can't touch you. Then something brushed my back. It was hard, coarse, flexible, like a hand made of hair. I ran. I don't remember the streets, nor the door, only the sound of my pulse devouring all else. I locked myself inside, breathless, trembling. I have not left since. They have seen me now. They have touched me, and I fear that even if I stop seeing them, they will still see me. For how does one unmake himself from the memory of a god? Story 10. There's something other than wires and walls. I quit my job as an electrician yesterday. Being an apprentice was miserable. The pay sucked, and I had no free time between the job site and night classes. I had plenty of legitimate reasons to give it up, but no one believed me when I told them the truth about why I left. My co-workers laughed at me, and my boss was just upset that I didn't put in a 2 weeks notice. When I told my girlfriend about what had happened and begged her to move out of the state with me, she called me a liar and a coward. I went to the police and told them everything I know, but they wouldn't hear it either. None of them realize that they're in danger. I know that he's going to come for me, but no one is safe. Not even you. Don't say that I didn't warn you. I never wanted to be an electrician, but my girlfriend insisted that I couldn't stay at my dead-end restaurant job forever. I had no college degree and no marketable skills beyond serving tables. So I went with her suggestion, the trades. Being an electrician didn't seem so bad. It seemed less messy than other blue-collar work. I interviewed with the union, got accepted, and started my apprenticeship. I was assigned to a master electrician named Gary. He's a scrawny old bald guy, probably around 70 years old, but more energetic than anyone else I know. I would end every day feeling absolutely beat from trying to catch up with him on the job site. I had no idea how a guy his age could move so quickly at the time. But after everything that's happened, I have some disturbing ideas about why that might be. Gary loved to tell me stories. I didn't really care to hear them, but I was willing to listen to appease the old geezer. He had worked in every state in the country at one point or another, and he had a story about each one of them. The strangest of them all was the one that he told about the state we lived in, Louisiana. I can still remember the first time he told it to me. It made my blood run cold. There used to be a job that I would do here, every year, right at the beginning of November, wherever I was in the country. I'd drive back here to make sure it got done. You ever hear about the blue flash near Lake Catherine, down south? I told him that I'd never heard of the blue flash, but I knew where Lake Catherine was. That was about 15 years ago now. People don't like to talk about it much. There was this family that moved into an old house down by the lake. The Browns. They were good folk, didn't cause any trouble, but they had a problem with their cellar. They thought it was electrical, but it wasn't. He paused. He must have sensed that I was only half paying attention. I asked him what the problem was, to show him that I had mostly been listening. It was something I can't explain. The blue flash. It would happen every year at the beginning of November. Had been happening for 40 years by the time the Browns moved in. I first saw it when I was an apprentice. Like you, the man I was working under was called to investigate it. And I was there with him. The family that lived their way before the Browns called him in to take a look at some wires in the cellar. It was the beginning of November, and the blue flash came. Thank God I was in the other room. You ever weld? I told him that I'd never welded. Ah, well, it was bright like an arc flash. Damn near blinded me. And the noise sounded like an atom bomb going off in my ears. Damn near made me hard of hearing. Ha! It was bright and loud for just a second or two, and then it was gone. No more blue flash. But then I looked in the room. No more electrician neither. I asked him what happened to the guy. Dead. Burn up in an instant. The smell was something else. Putrid and smoky. The family called the police. Imagine me trying to explain what happened to after the poor soul was removed. I came back and asked the family if I could take another look at the wires. Wanted to see what killed him, but I couldn't find anything. There was not a thing wrong with the electric down there. Nothing. I asked him what this had to do with the Browns. Oh, the Browns, right. So for the 40 years after the first time I saw the blue flash, I would come back at the same time every year and check the wires. The same day the blue flash would come. I kept my distance, of course, like the first time. Then I'd check the wires to see what the problem was. Never was a problem. Never found anything wrong with those wires in 40 years. At least nothing that could cause that. It wasn't an electrical problem. It was spiritual. I was a little confused. I asked how he knew that the blue flash would return after the first time. I guess it was just my intuition. 3 different families moved in and out of that house. Meanwhile, I was checking up on things for free at first, but when locals started talking about the blue flash, I turned it into a sales pitch. I would watch the flash come, keep anyone from getting too close, check the wires for good measure, accept my payment, and leave until the next year. I asked what this had to do with the Browns again. Oh, the Browns, that's right. So the Browns had this daughter, Jessica, and she's always playing around in the cellar. For the first time in 40 years, I'm running late to check on the blue flash. I hadn't met the Browns yet, but had heard that a new family had moved in who would need to be sold on my services. Surprise, surprise. I get a call asking for an electrician from the Browns on my way to their place. So I show up and explain myself. Poor Jessica was blinded in one eye from the blue flash the night before. I look at the wires again. Always the same thing. Nothing. The Browns press me for information, and I tell them that it ain't electrical. It's spiritual. I tell them about the poor man who died there 40 years before. They laugh at me. They think it's all a joke. It wasn't no joke. And they found out. Oh, they found out. I was getting pretty invested now. I asked what happened to them. I heard about most of it secondhand. I wasn't there, but people talked. They don't anymore, I suppose, but they did when it happened. Jessica saw a ghost in the cellar. Ghost of the man who was killed by the flash. I reckon. Jessica keeps ending up in the cellar, sleepwalking. Doesn't remember going down, but she keeps waking up there. Parents get freaked out. They try to block it off, but she keeps getting in. Eventually, her father buys brick and just walls off the cellar completely. No way in or out. I don't hear about all this until I show up for my annual checkup. When I arrive, the house is nothing but rubble. The flash came early, mid-October, right after it got walled off. Didn't like being held in, I suppose. Whole family dead. Presumably. He paused again for dramatic effect. I practically begged him for more information. You want to know the worst part? Are you sure? I did badly, and I told him so. There was hardly nothing left of the house but the cellar. They found Jessica's mother, father, and brother in the walls down there, twisted up like wires in the drywall. I laughed. He frowned. It told him that it was a good joke. He got me good. He wasn't amused. It wasn't no joke, son. Imagine a human body rolled up like a wire, as thin as you could possibly get. Then imagine it even thinner and tighter. They was hung in the walls like that. Some say that when the police found them there, they were still breathing. That's not possible, of course. Being twisted up and squished like that would kill you. You couldn't survive it. But still, that's what some folks say. I was skeptical, of course. I still thought that it might be a joke, but if it was... His poker face was impeccable. I asked him how that could even happen to someone's body. No idea. Must have been the flash. Or the ghost. Like I said, it's a spiritual problem that was going on there. There's no earthly explanation for it. I realized that he hadn't told me what happened to Jessica, so I asked him why she wasn't in the walls with the rest of her family. No one ever saw her again. Disappeared. Into the ether. The blue flash doesn't come in that cellar no more neither. Folks said it seems like whatever was in that cellar go out that night. Hard to argue with them. That was the end of the story. It stuck with me for a while. I just couldn't get out of my head. I asked some people who lived around Lake Catherine if they remembered anything about the Browns. They told me that there had been a family named the Browns who had lived there, and that they had been killed in an explosion. But they didn't know anything about a blue flash. When I asked about the family being twisted into wires, they laughed the same way I had. I guess someone had heard about the tragedy when it first happened and based one of those cheesy chain emails from back in the day around it. All the stuff about the blue flash and the family being twisted into wires was just made up. They told me. When I mentioned that Gary had told me about the story, they faintly remembered that there was an electrician that would come around every once in a while. Their impression was that he heard about the chain email and turned the story into his own since he had worked in the area. I felt a little better. After all that, Gary was just a habitual liar and not even an original storyteller. He told me the story a couple more times after that, and I just nodded along and acted like I was still interested. Really, all I could focus on were the contradictions and inconsistencies. The story didn't even really make sense, and I began to feel embarrassed at having ever been frightened by it. He tried to tell the story to me a fourth time, and by then I had had enough. I didn't like that he had tricked me at the beginning, and I didn't like for him to believe that he was still tricking me. I stopped him short while he was getting into it and told him what I knew. The whole thing was a farce, and the locals told me so. You believe him, huh? You're not going to believe the man who was actually there, who actually saw these things. You want proof? I told him that there couldn't be any proof, because it had never happened. He smiled. Let me show you something, kid. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. With great care, he slid an old and yellowed Polaroid out of the fold. He held it up to me, but I could only see the back of the photograph. Are you sure you want to see it, son? The proof you want. I told him that's what I wanted. He flipped the Polaroid around, and I saw the image. Immediately, I regretted my decision. The photo looked like it had been taken in a dark basement. I could make out a large piece of machinery on the floor and what appeared to be a family photo on the wall. That same wall had a large hole in it, and there was something you could just barely see inside the wall. I didn't want to admit what I was seeing, but it looked like what Gary had described in the story. A person twisted up into the shape of a wire. I shoved Gary's hand away from me to get that picture out of my sight. He laughed. What? You don't like it, son? I thought that's what you wanted. I asked him who took the photo and how he had it. I took it, of course. No one believes the story, so I have this. Can't deny this. I told him that it could be fake. The lighting was so dark that I couldn't really tell what I was looking at. Then why are you so scared? I walked away, angry. He was probably just tricking me again, I thought. Why was I so scared? I kicked myself for falling for it. Months went by, and he didn't bring up the blue flash or the browns again. I started to forget about it. 2 days ago, he invited me to get a drink with him. I didn't have any night classes to go to, so I obliged. I wasn't exactly dying to hang out with the old man more than I already did, but I didn't really want to go home either. We got to the bar, and he started putting them away like it was some kind of race. I was on my second beer, and he had already moved on from beer to whiskey. He was babbling on and on about all of his different stories, and they started to blend together into one big stream of consciousness lie. After about an hour and a half, he was absolutely hammered. I had to walk him to the bathroom and keep him steady while he threw up into the toilet, but it didn't help matters. He wiped the vomit from his lips and asked me to walk him home. I had never been there before, but according to him, it was just a half mile down the road. We got there eventually, but we had to make multiple pit stops so he could throw up. I wonder how often he did this sort of thing. When we got to the house, he spent what felt like an hour going through his pockets until he finally found his keys. We went inside, and I helped him lie down on the couch in his living room. He asked for a blanket and a bowl to throw up in. When he had those things, he asked me to sit down next to him for a little while. I want to talk about the blue flash, he slurred out. I told him that I didn't want to talk about that anymore. No, I apologize. I didn't tell you the truth. I told you the made-up version. The made-up version that I tell people. I told him that was okay. I wasn't really interested in hearing any more about it. He ignored me. No, kid, the blue flash, it really happened. I saw it and it spoke to me. Something was in it. Spirit. Spiritual. I saw it in that cellar. And it said things to me. Didn't like it. I didn't like it first, but I wanted to hear more. It told me it would come back every year. Same time, same place, every year. So I did, and it would tell me more. Told me how I could make my own blue flash. Told me about how I could make my own and what it could do for me. Could lure people, mess with their brains, make them think things. And then I could. He trailed off and his eyes closed. He was still mumbling under his breath, but I could only hear a few words here or there. Live forever, squeeze, machine, and poor girl. For what I could make out, I sat next to him for another minute, then decided that it was about time for me to leave. I stood up and took a few steps toward the door, which caused him to regain a bit of consciousness. Where are you going? You're not going to the basement, are you? He stammered, with concern in his voice. I told him that I was just going to leave. Don't go in the basement. Son, I don't like people snooping around. Snooping around my house. Not your business. He got quiet again, and I wondered why he was so concerned about me going to the basement. I just stood there and stared at him for a while to make sure that he was asleep. There was no more mumbling, just snoring. So I figured that the coast was clear. I walked around with the lightest steps I could muster, looking for the basement door, and found it. I checked again to make sure that he was still snoring, then descended the steps. I fished around for a light switch when I got to the bottom. I found one, but flipping it did nothing. How ironic. The master electrician couldn't be bothered to fix the wiring in his own basement. My phone's flashlight would have to do. It cut through the pitch darkness and revealed a familiar scene. There was a large machine in the middle of the room, and a family photo on the wall closest to me. This was where he had staged that photo. The machine was strange. I had never seen anything like it. I searched for any sort of brand logo, but found nothing. It appeared to be custom built. It appeared to be operated by a hand crank, which would cause multiple large metal rolling pins to turn. What its purpose was I couldn't tell at the time, although now I feel it should have been obvious. I examined the pins a little closer and saw that they were stained with dark splotches all over. Could it have been blood? I continued to look over the machine, being as silent as I could, and I realized that I could hear a faint repetitive noise coming from behind me. It sounded almost like breathing. Had Gary followed me down here, being as quiet as I was? I turned slowly to face the wall, expecting to see him staring at me, but there was no one there. I could still hear the breathing, coming from directly in front of me. It couldn't be, but it sounded like it was coming from the wall. I got closer, and the sound got louder. It was gaspy, desperate breathing, like someone who just can't seem to ever get enough oxygen. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I could hear it as clear as day. Could an animal have gotten stuck in there? I listened intently, and after a few moments, I heard something that I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. First, a groan, a warped but human-sounding groan, and then a single whispered word that sounded like it had been forced to their throat with every fiber of their being. Help. I turned to run up the stairs and out of that place as fast as I could. I got to the first step, looked up, and saw Gary in the doorway. He was slumped over, holding himself up by leaning on the door frame, but I could see fury in his eyes despite his drunkenness. I told you not to go down there. Kid, why? Why would you go down there? You're gonna make me. I cut him off to tell him how sorry I was. I pleaded with him, saying that it was just an honest mistake. I told him that I wouldn't tell anyone about what I saw, and that I didn't really see anything anyway. The rage in his face only increased. No. You wanted to see. Even after I told you not to. Well, you saw. Did you hear her? Did you hear them? Them. There's more than one. Many from all over. One, at least one, from every state. Ha! They stay breathing for a while after the squeezing and the twisting, for a long while, even after I get the life essence out of M. Blue Flash told me how to do it. Extract it and store it. You want to see that too? The Blue Flash? I can show you. I realized that begging wasn't going to work. So all that was left was to try to run up the steps and push past him. As I climbed, he pushed his hands out in front of him and started chanting something loudly. I couldn't make out any of that he said. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I don't think anything he said was English. Right as I reached the top of the stairs, there was a momentary burst of blinding light that came from behind me. I'm certain that if I had been looking toward it, I would have lost my vision. My back felt like it was on fire. I tackled Gary, and we both went tumbling to the ground. He tried to get on top of me and hold me to the floor, but I could just barely wriggle my way out of his unnaturally strong grip. I ran out the door and back to bar, screaming, his chanting still ringing in my ears. I got in my car and drove home. I stayed up all night, watching out the window, as my girlfriend yelled at me for being out so late. You know what happened next morning? I quit my job, and I told my girlfriend, my co-workers, and my boss what happened. Nobody took me seriously. I can't blame them. It's a ridiculous story, and technically I didn't really see anything. What I heard in the wall could have been my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe the machine was stained with oil and not blood. The bright light in the basement could have been anything. It could all have been an extremely elaborate prank that Gary was pulling on me. I can't prove anything, but I know what it was. I'm packing up and leaving Louisiana for Pennsylvania. I've got family there. I'm not safe anywhere, but at least I'll put some distance between me and him. He's going to come for me eventually. I can feel it. I don't expect you to believe this story either, but I'm begging you, just be careful if you need to hire an electrician. He's going to be around for a while, and he could be anywhere. Don't end up in Gary's walls.